Okay.
Guess Jack is looking for it too, so.
I have in here, I can read it off and you guys can second, if you guys want to do that.
Okay, whatever. Whatever works for you guys, not my committee.
Yeah, I'll figure it out.
Okay, so are we ready?
Might as well just jump in.
Okay, you ready? Okay, it is now 5:01. I call this meeting to
Recording
order.
in progress.
Okay. So for the record, my name is Huang Tran, Chair of this committee. We have our newest council member join this committee meeting, Paul McDaniel. Welcome. We have Council President Linda Kochma, Deputy Mayor Susan Honda, Committee Member Jack Dovey, and Council Member Jack Walsh, also known as JW. And also join us online is Lydia Asifa Dawson. Welcome.
Hello.
Okay, so before we go into this long agenda, so last night I was thinking about this agenda, right? 17 items, and I tried to figure out how did this happen? Either staff love it too much, or this is actually a welcoming gift to Mr. Paul McDaniel right here. So I would like to think that this is your welcoming gift, Paul. So.
They can take it back.
All right. Do we have any public comments?
Yes, there's one written comment, and it's available to view online.
Could we make the motion to pull off item N before we have our public comment?
Oh, sorry about that, yes.
I'd like to move that item N be taken off the agenda and move to a study session at a later date.
And I'll second that. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Matter passed 3-0. This item will be moved for future discussion. All right. Public comments.
One written comment, and it's available to view online.
Ryan, do we need to, for the written comments, do we need to read that here or no? We do not. Okay.
Oh, Ryan's here. Continue on.
Do we have any online comments? No? I'm sorry, I missed something.
No.
Okay. Okay, we are moving on to the committee business then. All right, we are moving on to item A, approval of summary minutes for June 2023.
I move adoption.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to pass the summary minutes for June 2023. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Matter passed 3-0. We're now moving on to item B, ordinance residential open space subdivision and zoning code amendments. Evans.
All right, may I begin? Good evening, Committee Chair Tran, Council Committee Members McDaniel and Dovey, Council President Kochmar, Deputy Mayor Honda, and Council Members Asifa Dawson, Walsh, and I believe that is all. Before you use an ordinance that amends our residential open space requirements in Title 18 Subdivision Code and Title 19 Zoning and Development Code. The policy question is whether City Council should adopt amendments to the regulation of open space in Titles 18 and 19 of Federal Way Revised Code. This ordinance improves the consistency in our residential open space requirements between zones and between single-family and multifamily residential uses. It improves the clarity in how we interpret and apply our residential open space requirements, reducing ambiguity and confusion in the meanings and interpretations of terms that frequently occur on this issue. It implements certain aspects of the Housing Action Plan, and it also reduces required on-site usable open space both for single-family and for multifamily residential uses. And that's important in light of the recently adopted park impact fee. It also reduces barriers to new housing in certain zones and for certain uses, which is important, an important aspect in implementing the Housing Action Plan. It additionally, go to the next slide, sorry about that. It also, in certain cases, can preserve natural areas, particularly when we see applicants who would otherwise retain stands of trees and other natural areas that are outside of critical areas, instead propose those for their usable open space, which can be run counter to other priorities of the city. So I'm going to run through really the 8 categories of these code updates. And the first and probably the most significant one is changing the method by which we calculate open space requirements for single-family residential subdivisions. Right now, our code requires that 10% of the gross land area of a site that's being subdivided is active open space. Specifically, it's usable open space, but as described in our code, that's interchangeable with active open space, and that 15% of the gross land area is open space in general. So that additional 5% can be other types of open space. The proposed update changes that method of calculation from a percent of gross site area basis to a square foot per unit basis, consistent with how we apply that for multifamily uses. And the proposed update would be 150 square feet of usable open space per single family unit. And also that 50% of that usable open space is active open space. And we've also added a definition for active open space, which I'll get to in a moment. Just to visually show you this one, if you have a hypothetical site, this is not in Federal Way, but that right now in our code, this entire site, say there was one parcel or a series of parcels making up this area outlined in red. Even if this site has significant critical areas, wetlands and streams, multiple stormwater ponds, all of those essentially unusable areas are currently calculated in our open space requirements. So in some cases, it can get a fairly extreme disconnect between the area of the land and what the open space requirement is that's being applied. So this update better targets and better aligns our open space requirements for single-family subdivisions to the number of units that are resulting, and thus the number of people who need open space. Next, for multifamily, we updated for several uses in a few different zones the required amount of multifamily open space. For the BC or community business zone, we have just made it consistent with the city center core and frame zones in the same way that a lot of our housing action plan ordinance updates lump together these 3 zones. We've done the same and felt it was important for BC to be consistent with city center core and frame. For the other 2, for multifamily uses in our residential single family, which really only applies in the RS 5.0 single family zone. That's the only zone that allows, in single family, that allows multifamily uses. And more frequently in the residential multifamily or RM zones, we've made those requirements consistent with the 150 square feet per unit that's currently required for the BN or neighborhood business zone. So just in reducing those quantities, we've just moved those required amounts of open space down to a level that's already required for one of our zones. And then that 150 square feet per unit is also now consistent, if this is passed, with the amount for single family subdivisions. And just like for the single family subdivision update, that usable open space, that 150 square feet per unit or 100 square feet per unit must still be 50% active open space. So that gets us to the definitions. The third update here is clarifying definitions of open space terms that come up frequently in imposing these requirements in terms of the term open space, the term usable open space, and the term public open space, just clarifying those meanings. As mentioned, it adds a definition that's greatly needed for active open space. And it also provides more flexibility to allow other types of open space. We've added a definition of passive open space. So for the 50% of open space that's not active, there's other types of open space like wildlife viewing areas, shelters, seating and picnic areas that, that many cities frequently allow as open space and that are reasonable to count toward that open space total. And in those definitions, we've provided examples of different types of open space that falls under each, active and passive. These are examples. They're not all inclusive. So if an applicant proposed something that's not on this list, it would fall under the director discretion that already exists in interpreting certain aspects of our open space requirements. Fourth, it provides an exemption for all developments of 5 or fewer units from the open space requirements. There are few, if any, examples of cities, at least from the example cities that we've looked into, that require on-site open space for all residential units. That's particularly the case for single family. But that 5 or fewer units it can be difficult when you have a very small number of units and require common ownership and common maintenance of open space to serve those small number of units. And this is also roughly in line with some of the example cities that we researched in developing this code, which is provided as Exhibit 3 or Attachment 3 in this packet. So again, all residential developments of 5 or fewer units would be exempt from providing this on-site open space. It updates the process for applying our fee in lieu of option for single-family subdivision open space. So right now, the way that applicants request and then the way that the fee in lieu of dollar amounts are calculated for single-family subdivisions is very much aligned with that 15% of gross site area basis for calculating that open space. Now that we're changing that method, that way of calculating the fee in lieu of doesn't make sense anymore. So we've simply made it consistent with the fee in lieu of calculation method that's applied for multifamily uses. Simple as that. So it's consistent between Title 18 and Title 19. We've expanded the fee in lieu of option that currently exists for our city center zones, for multifamily in our city center core and frame zones. We've expanded that to the BC community business zone. And that is consistent and specifically implements a small but very precise aspect of our housing action plan. Seventh, it removes an allowance for landscaping tracts to count toward open space requirements. That doesn't make any sense right now our code allows landscaping tracts, which are full of landscaping, irrigation, et cetera, to count toward some of the open space requirements for only a small number of uses in a few zones. But where that's allowed, it doesn't make sense because landscaping areas are essentially unusable from an open space perspective. They're visually pleasing, but they're not usable in any practical sense. And eighth and finally, it improves consistency in open space requirements among like uses and zones. So when you have a given use that has a certain requirement for things like children's play equipment or specific dimension requirements, when you have a use in one zone that applies those, right now there's some inconsistency across zones in where those features are required. And so we've improved the consistency in how those requirements are applied across all of the zones that have all of the zones that have residential uses. You'll find in the ordinance a small smattering of some additional just language cleanup type edits, since we kind of had the hood open on looking at all of our open space requirements. We naturally found a few areas where the languages were just not clear as currently worded. But those 8 were the real substantive changes that have a material effect on most residential projects that we see. This had a SEPA determination of non-significance issued on May 12th, had a planning commission hearing and recommendation for approval on June 21st. We're now at FedRAC, and this would go to a first read on August 8th and final adoption on September 5th. There have been 0 public comments to date, unless the written comment that you mentioned is in any way related to this amendment. But we have not, in planning, received any comments to date on this ordinance. The development regulation amendment criteria is listed here. It's provided in the staff report, and all of those criteria are fully met. And the Planning Commission action, consistent with the provisions of Federal Way Revised Code, the Planning Commission recommended approval of the amendment before you, and the mayor's recommendation is to adopt and approve. Any questions?
Thank you, Evan. Committee members, Dovey?
Yeah, I have one question. We did get some comment on today from the Builders Association, I believe it is. And they asked, why are we doing it 5 lots instead of 9 lots? Can you explain the logic, or is that something we should do or shouldn't do, or why did they ask that question?
So that 5, that is, in terms of the exemption, that 5 or fewer unit exemption applies both for single-family lots. It would apply to zero lot line multifamily situations, but also to multifamily development on one parcel of 5 or fewer units. So there are a couple main sources for that number. One, right now the requirement is all. So anytime you move it from all, somewhere between all and nothing, there has to be, it can be quite difficult to come up with what's the appropriate number. We looked at other cities in attachment 3, and there were a handful of cities that were around 4, 5, or 6 lots. There were a handful that were around 10. We also considered that for short plats, right now short plats are 9 or fewer lots. In kind of polling the planning team in a couple different meetings, we sometimes do a round robin kind of crowdsourcing of questions. It didn't make sense to basically exempt all short plats from these requirements. And I will note, I think the Master Builders Association did call for a clarifying question. It was just a call, not an official comment. And they asked me that same question. And it doesn't make sense to apply that, to align that necessarily with the short plat threshold. Mainly because that short plat threshold, the main difference, a lot of the difference between a short plat and a long plat of 10 or more units is in terms of process and the decision maker. A lot of the same things that we review for a long plat, we're still reviewing for a short plat. So in terms of substance, it didn't make sense just to say, oh, all short plats are exempt. But less than that, it was really a rough kind of middle ground between the cities that we were looking at, kind of the regular benchmark cities that are in your packet. I think there were 12 or 13 cities that are listed there of similar size and circumstances to Federal Way. I will also note, today I discovered a new layer that our Public Works Department has, which it's not a complete layer, it's a GIS layer though that shows several dozen homeowners associations in Federal Way. I could find, of the several dozen homeowners associations that we have data on, I only found 2 that were fewer than 5 unit homeowner associations. So in terms of establishing a homeowner association, if you just have like a 2, 3, 4, 5 unit development, it's a lot of process. It can become difficult, particularly if you're talking about, say that amount triggers, in terms of meeting that 50% active open space requirement, triggers the need for a basketball court or some other active amenity. It can be difficult when you have fewer than 5 or fewer units to commonly maintain that piece of infrastructure. So,
I just have one more follow-up question. Okay, so I get it was just threw a dart and you came up with 5 instead of 9. That's kind of, you guys had a round table and that's kind of, I mean, a little bit more than throwing a dart.
it was more than that, but yeah.
But how many, we have a housing crisis, we have to build 11,000, whatever the number is, 800, I think, new homes or new places. So what's the difference between 5 and 9? Is it like 37 lots, or, I mean, is it a big number, or is it just kind of like no big deal?
Well, in terms of the amount of open space, it would just be that 4 lot difference times 150.
Well,
So-
that's not my question. The question is a 5 lot versus a 9 lot. How many opportunities are in Federal Way that somebody would, if it was 9, how many more opportunities are we filling in instead of just 5? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
in terms of the frequency
Yeah,
of.
we just passed a parks fee, so everybody's gonna be paying in. And so now you got X amount of dirt around, and some short plats are 5, and some could be 9. I mean, how many pieces of property are we actually talking about that the distance between 5 or 9 affects?
That would require going, we could probably get that number, based on our buildable lands inventory, but it would require looking at our buildable lands data and kind of seeing how many might fall, based on the zone, fall within that 5 to 9 gap. Oh,
It's probably a small number.
So the one thing I would want to add to this is, the landscaping on housing is molten at the moment. House Bill 1110 basically is going to cause us to go back and look at our code in terms of allowing more than one house per lot. So when you think about it, the difference between 5 and 9, if there's 9 homes there and there's no open space, they paid into their park impact fee, that's great. There's a city park, a half a mile away or whatever the case is. But at what point is there a tipping point that you want some small green space to serve just those homes, right? And the difference between, if we're talking about 5 lots, right now you're talking about 5 houses, and it's like, okay, they got yards and maybe they don't need something, but as we start to put maybe 3 or 4 houses on each lot potentially, now that you've multiplied that dramatically to the point where now you're starting to say, well, maybe there's 20 houses there that don't have a little green space that's right there. The closest thing is now a half mile away. So I think that played into maybe our conservativeness in not going to the full 9 and keeping it at 5.
Thank you.
What is the average development size in Federal Way? Do you guys know what like you were saying earlier, how many is 5, 4, 9, 10? What's the average size that most people are trying to build?
I don't have a definitive answer. Most likely, it's well over those numbers you just listed. If you're including in that the large subdivisions and multifamily developments. So as far as short plats, I did ask kind of our team, particularly those who've been around for a long time and have seen a lot of short plat applications. Do we feel like there's any consistent size short plat that we're seeing? And there isn't. It's really it ranges from, we frequently see 2, we see 9, we see 6 and 4. They're really all over the place. But we could probably pull up our permit system and get a number in terms of the overall for all developments, but also specific to short plats.
And in your guys' opinion, the change from the 5 to 9, like you had mentioned, is not going to make a significant difference in developers' decisions to either move or not?
I highly doubt it. That additional, that trigger for the 150 square feet per unit is just a fraction of some of the other expenses in terms of frontage improvements and impact fees and other things that those developers are paying. So I don't see that making a big difference.
Okay. My other 2 questions were the fee in lieu that you had mentioned. It sounds like now it's going based off of the actual value of the end property?
Correct.
Okay.
Specific for single family. So it's basically making that single family calculation consistent with multifamily, and it's based off of the value equivalent in a square foot basis of the land that would otherwise have been required as open space
For single families, right?
for single
So
family.
does multifamily already have the in lieu built in then?
Multifamily does, but you can only do 50% fee in lieu for multifamily, and it's only allowed for multifamily in city center core and frame. So we're expanding that to BC.
Okay.
But outside of those zones, it's limited to just like, I think, senior housing and a few other less common residential uses.
Gotcha. And then my last question is, one of the items that was on here as an amendment was how the fee in lieus are being used by park department, and it says pretty much staff response was they addressed it at a previous meeting. I wasn't there for that. Do you happen to know how the park uses the in lieu of money?
So they can use, right now, our code specifies that it be used in a certain park planning area. Amendment, there was a change in how that is applied in the recently adopted park impact fee. So really, that money can be used citywide. As far as specific projects, the Planning Commission did ask about specific projects as far as how much fee in lieu is collected and also where it's being used. And the specific examples that Planning Commission asked, those answers are in appendix or attachment 1. But I think the projects that they asked about so happen not to have required fee in lieu.
Yeah, I saw that.
Okay.
Right, that was it.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. So the mixed-use project on 348, Does this affect that in any way?
No, because that would already be vested to the requirements at the time of that application.
Okay, and it can't be changed.
Unless they withdrew that I would have to see what the status of the application, but they'd have to withdraw and reapply, and then they'd be subject to these requirements.
Okay, thank you.
I have one more qualifying question, if I may. And Keith, you made me think about this. So with the new state law where you can put up to 6 dwelling units on a lot, if we have 5, they could do that, but if we go to 6, then they'd have to have 900 square feet of open space, 150 per. Okay, so this protects the neighborhoods by doing it this way, then going up to 9, correct? Okay, thank you.
Okay, okay, I don't see any other questions. You want to make a motion, or you want me to make a motion?
I've got it right, okay. You got it? Go ahead.
Okay.
I move to forward the proposed ordinance to the first reading on August 8th, 2003.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Matter passed 3-0. Thank you. And next item, Orion Residential Open Space Comprehensive Plan Amendments. Evans.
So this one is much simpler, and this is a amendment to the Park, Rec, and Open Space Plan, which is part of our comprehensive plan. It's part of the capital facilities chapter of the comprehensive plan. And the policy question is whether City Council should approve this amendment to the Federal Way Comp Plan and the Parks, Rec, and Open Space Plan to facilitate the change to the method in how we calculate open space for single-family subdivisions. And simply, it would delete one reference, just one sentence, to the single-family open space calculation method in the PROS plan, so that a code update that we just talked about that changes the open space calc method is consistent with the comprehensive plan. And that's all it is. It's just deleting this one sentence that says, for example, residential subdivisions are required to provide open space for 15% of the gross land area of the subdivision. So that would allow us to change the method by which open space is calculated for single-family subdivisions. The comp plan amendment procedure, since this is not part of our annual comp plan amendment, it requires that it be done concurrent with a city budget amendment, and also that it have a public hearing that's conducted by City Council. So the SEPA DNS was issued in June. We're here at FedRAC. So the first read and public hearing conducted by council would be August 8th, and then adoption would be September 9th, which is also the targeted date of this next mid-year budget amendment. There have been 0 public comments on this ordinance to date, and the staff report speaks to how all of the criteria for amending the comprehensive plan are met. And here's the recommendation options for City Council as far as moving this forward to a first read and public hearing on August 8th.
Okay, Mr. Dovey?
Yeah, I'd like to move to forward the proposed ordinance to the public hearing first reading on August 8th, 2023.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. This matter passed 3-0. Thank you, Evan.
Thanks.
We now moving on to next item, new position code compliance supervisor. Keith, welcome.
Thank you. See if there we go. Thank you, Committee Chair Tran, committee members McDaniel and Dovey, Council President Kochmar, Deputy Mayor Honda, Councilmember Walsh, and Councilmember Asefa Dawson, Keith Niven, Community Development Director. So this evening, we're going to talk about a code compliance supervisor. So the policy question in front of the City Council is, should the City Council authorize the addition of a new 1 FTE full-time employee, code compliance supervisor position in the Community Development Department? So what does code compliance do? Code compliance writes tickets. Code compliance puts door knockers on doorknobs for properties that are having issues complying with code. They deal with appliances in the front yard, construction or demolition materials piled in the front yard, clearly inoperable vehicles, parking in the front yard, on lawn, furniture in the front yard, rodents. They do not respond to raccoons. So if you or your neighbors are having problems with raccoons, that's not us. Just telling you, we get a number of raccoon and geese complaints. Neither one of them are us. Overgrown yards and encampment cleanup.
Keith, who responds to raccoons?
It's wildlife. It's the not wildlife. It's animal control.
Oh, police.
King County, right?
Okay.
I'm sorry?
We have animal
We have our
control.
own. Sweet.
Oh,
Yes.
awesome.
Possums.
Well, no, awesome to know that. Who responds to possums? No.
Skunks.
That's at nighttime. That's a different thing. No, just kidding. So these are a couple photos of recent code compliance complaints that have come in. You can see here on the left, we have a particular property owner who tends to pile things in between. So this is a sidewalk down here, and their property actually starts at about here. But the fence is way back here, but they have a chunk of land in between right of way and their fence, and that tends to become storage. This one on the right, this happens in a number of different neighborhoods where things just kind of start looking like they're getting collected for one reason or another. And so what ends up happening is code compliance will go out and issue a violation or a warning letter to start with to try and get the property owners to clean them up. In addition, there's encampments. As you know, typically we work with SOU initially to trespass any of the potential inhabitants of those camps. And then if it's on city property, we will go ahead and clean up the debris. If it's on private property, we will work with the property owners. We currently have an encampment south of 320th, east side of I-5. WashDOT, we've been working with them. It is now apparently on the DeVita property and not in the WashDOT right-of-way, so that then becomes a conversation with the property owner. So this map, what it shows is we have broken up the city into 3 zones, kind of the north, the central, and the south. And so we have one code compliance officer that right now is assigned to each of these zones, and then they basically respond to the complaints that we get within those areas. What we're suggesting is, if this is hard to read, my apologies. We have 3 code compliance officers right now. We're asking for a 4th. What it will do is allow us to be more responsive to complaints, but also to do some additional code compliance work. It would also allow, if it's hired in as a supervisor, it would allow us to potentially have a little bit more direction within this work group. Currently, the code compliance staff report directly to the building official, and what we're suggesting is that we would then have them report both to the building official and to myself directly. The mayor's recommendation is option 1, approve funding of the new code compliance supervisor. And with that, I will answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Mr. Dovey?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, Mr. Daniel.
Yeah, just a couple quick ones. The 138,000, that include benefits, or is that?
Yes,
is
it
that full
does. So
package?
that's full meal deal.
And then it looked like the description is they're gonna be supervised, but they'll also be able to be boots on the ground and go out there and also do inspections and stuff too?
Yes.
Okay. And then after, I can't remember if this is not an ARPA fund, right?
No.
Okay. So this is coming out of your guys' budget then moving forward? Is that the?
So this would need to be added to the next budget adjustment, and I'll look to the
It would
finance director.
It would be rolled into the next quarter's budget amendment. We didn't get it in time for this one.
Okay. And then the last one is, I noticed today a new camp. So what is the process as residents to report these new camps that do pop up?
So the easiest way to do it is the See Click Fix or the Eyes on Federal Way, where they can report the encampment. you know, the first thing is when those come in, we then assess where they are, whose property they're on. You know, we typically work with PD in terms of finding out if there are people living there or if it's been vacated. And those are kind of decision points along the way, which then dictate the next course of action after that.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. What is the difference between a supervisor and a manager for this position?
Yeah, so Human Resources did kind of they did a search of peer cities and to see what kind of positions there were. When it came back, the recommendation from Vanessa was that this be a supervisor and not be labeled as a manager. There's probably a nuance there that I probably don't fully understand or appreciate, but the recommendation was that this position is code compliance supervisor and not manager.
Does that have anything to do with the salary range for this position?
It may be lower because of that.
So for a code officer, what is the salary range for our current code officers as compared to this, for this position?
I'm looking at Scott. Neither one of us have that information right now.
Okay.
Sorry.
I have a couple other questions, if that's okay. This is a new position, correct?
Yes.
Is the job description written, and did the current code officers help write the job description?
The job description, we have not actually written that yet because we don't have the position approved. If you guys approve the position, the next step would be we would use one of those peer cities that have a supervisor within their organization, look at their job description, probably use that as a starting point for putting together that job description for the city.
And so then the start date would be?
Quickest would be my guess. If it gets approved, we might get somebody on board in September.
Okay. And then for a city our size, so this would be then 4 code compliance officers. So is that what we should expect for a city our size, or are we still understaffed in this department?
Do you have any metrics on that?
We do not have metrics on the staffing. I can tell you the comparison that we did was going out to agencies and seeing if we had leads or supervisors, and my recommendation was based on the salary being higher than a lead but less than a manager, and most of our comparable agencies having supervisors in place of division managers.
Okay.
Yeah. I think you had also asked a question about the salary of our
yes.
code compliance officers.
Correct, the salary range.
The starting range for code compliance officer is just under 75,000 with a maximum pay of about 94,000.
Is that with benefits?
No, that's wages only.
And then my last question is, with this position, because it would be the supervisor, so I understand that a code compliance officer does a lot of stuff, and a lot of it is paperwork.
Yes, tickets, follow up with property owners. There's a lot of paperwork.
Would the supervisor then be responsible for putting liens on, doing the lien paperwork and the higher level paperwork, I guess I'm trying to say?
Yeah, so the notice of violations, which potentially lead to liening property, we've demolished structures like, dilapidated homes. There's some pretty complicated things that our current code compliance officers are doing. I think Scott and I are going to need to talk about whether or not it's going to make sense for some of those things to default to the supervisor with someone with a little bit maybe higher technical skills, especially when we're going to court to potentially defend the city's actions.
And then what is experience required for this position?
I can't answer that this evening.
Okay, well, maybe later you can. Anyway, well, I think that it's I'm glad that we're adding this position, so I certainly support this. And I hope that we can get someone on board soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lydia, I see your hands up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Kevin. Or Keith, I'm sorry. I combined your first and last name.
No worries.
Okay. When it comes to parking, not necessarily legal, but parking on the streets where neighbors are really complaining, would that then come to this, or is it still a police issue?
I'm looking at the deputy chief. Parking is police.
Okay, so thank you. I have multiple complaints, so I'll reach out to the police department.
All right, I don't see any more hands up, so can I have motion, please?
I move to forward option 1 to the 8 August 2023 consent agenda for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. This matter passed 3-0. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And now we are moving on to item E, converting 2 part-time records specialist position to quartermaster. Welcome, Deputy Chief Sumter.
Good evening, Council. Kyle Sumter, Deputy Chief of Police. It's my privilege to speak for the Police Department today. You may recall that I was here last month seeking approval to convert some existing police positions that are vacant into other needs. We subsequently pulled that so we could refine it a little bit, and that refinement has allowed us to simplify it. And that is very simply this. We had 2 part-time, half-time record specialists, both of whom retired many months ago, and the position has been vacant because there's less need for transcription now. Now, while we have body-worn cameras, and part of the IT package that comes with that automatically puts in rough transcription. So when we see the video, we can see a transcription right there already with it. There are some cases that we need transcription done, though, internal investigations and so forth, but those are so rare that we recommend we contract that out to agencies that have had the proper background investigations done. So we have less need for transcription, and we have a great deal more need in quartermaster. So as I talked about last time I was here, we are requesting that we convert those 2 vacant part-time record specialist positions into a second quartermaster position. And within quartermaster, we create 2 tiers. The current quartermaster will be bumped up to coordinator, and she coordinates the volunteers. We have a team of volunteers that handle our police fleet. So she will be the quartermaster coordinator, and we'll hire an entry level, if approved, hire an entry-level quartermaster to take care of all the rest of the uniforms and equipment for our 186 employees. And you can see that the cost to the city in making this change will be about $28,000 a year, and we will absorb that with salary savings that we are already experiencing. The positions have been vacant for more than 6 months, and we've already saved the money to account for the next several months of a new quartermaster position. So the question we have for you is, should the Federal Police Department convert 2 vacant part-time record specialist positions, formerly transcription, to a second quartermaster position and establish 2 tiers in the quartermaster position?
Thank you. Mr. Dovey?
Yeah, I'd like to move to forward the proposed police department position conversion to the August 18th, 2023 consent agenda for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The matter passed 3-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Thomas, could you help me
That was quick.
get ready to go?
The next 3 items is for discussion only. So Tanya, welcome.
Good evening, Chair Tran and committee members McDaniel and Dovey, and Council President Kochmar, Deputy Mayor Honda, Councilperson Walsh, and Councilwoman Asefa Dawson. So I have 3 presentations. I will try to keep them brief. They are all for presentation and information only, but of course, questions are always welcome. So the first one tonight is Economic Development Q2 report. As you may recall, we did provide a Q1 report, and we will continue to do so until otherwise requested. So essentially, the information is in your staff memo in longhand, and this is just a PowerPoint presentation that summarizes what is in your staff report. So as you know, economic development, we practice in several different areas, and so we'll be giving you a real estate update tonight, a business attraction update, business retention, expansion, marketing, and tourism. So just at a high level, this probably isn't any new information for anyone, but in the office market right now, the office vacancy rate is up quite substantially in the second quarter, and it is actually exceeding the peak rates of vacancy during the 2008 financial crisis. So I think we've all kind of observed that, and that is, with real estate, there are always trends. We had a big kind of break in the trends due to COVID, and so this is something that we have seen on the office market in the last few quarters. On industrial, conversely, we have seen this as well, that industrial is up about 30% in demand, and that is also something that we've seen in the city, across the county, and across the country. And finally, something I think that is good news, considering what we have just come out of, is that retail is quite low on the vacancy rate, so it's less than 10%, and it's in middle single digits. So this is pretty good news for us. I was also talking to some property owners today, and they actually have pretty low vacancies as well. So, in the ones in the downtown core, there's maybe, a handful of vacancies in any of the particular properties in the downtown core. So also good for us. On the real estate development side, as far as construction permits go, we try to also keep the committee and council apprised of the types of construction permits and the total valuation. So in Q2, we had about just above $26 million in construction permits that were issued, and the top categories for issuances were in school and education, healthcare, and entertainment, and surprisingly, office. As we move on to business retention and expansion, something really nice to see is that we did issue some new licenses in Q1. We issued about 52 new licenses, and these are all for licenses for businesses that have addresses within Federal Way. So as you may recall, we also do issue business licenses for contractors. So if you're having plumbing done on your house or some electrical work, those entities are required to have a business license, but these have been scrubbed for those types of contractor permits, and so it's just actual businesses that are opening in Federal Way. And then we also had a nice number of business license renewals last quarter as well. Another nice bit of information on the business retention and expansion side is that we did update our food truck code, and so our community development and planning team did a great job of reviewing code, updating it, and now making it a little bit easier for food trucks to operate around the city. And moving on to business attraction, we just wanted to provide a small update on sister cities. So just to show that we are continuing the relationship with our sister cities, which, to remind everyone, we have 3 sister cities, but 2 actually that we visited recently, the first in Hachinohe, Japan, and the second in Donghae, South Korea. We also do have a 3rd sister city relationship with Rivne in Ukraine. For the sister cities that we visited in Korea and Japan, we did send thank you letters and thank you gifts to them. Last week, actually, some of our council members attended, and Councilwoman Asafadasan and Councilman Jack Walsh were attending our reunion dinner last week. Oh, sorry, and Chair Tran, I apologize. We're also attending the reunion dinner, which was quite nice. And we are continuing to nurture the relationship that we've started to build with a large Korean organization because they do have an interest in possibly bringing some entrepreneurial businesses over to the U.S. or some other countries. And so we are just nurturing that to see where it goes. And then lastly, we do have 1 to 2 Zoom calls that are planned. Our next Zoom call with our partners in our sister cities is going to be in the fall, so September, October time period. And then I will not read all of these businesses, but as you can see, we do have several new businesses. The majority of these are on the Commons property, so the pad spaces around the Commons, and a couple that are in the main body of the Commons area. And this is, I believe, the last slide. This is something, a theme that I think everyone has seen for the last few months, but we are getting ready to ramp up our top 100 people, places, and things in Federal Way history list. So our goal is to get 300 entries. We have a handful so far, but we are going to ramp it up with a marketing campaign to do our very best to reach our goal of 300 entries. And then we will see how we will present that to the city. And really what the goal of this is to start engendering some pride in some of the unique things that we have in Federal Way, to really start kind of digging into our history and start kind of dusting off some really fun, cool stories about some people that have been influential in Federal Way. We actually had one entry, which was super sweet, for a wrestling coach at one of the high schools, that he should be included in our list. So anybody, anything, any place is welcome. There is a QR code on the screen. We also have posters up at the community center, at the library, in mayor's office, and as I mentioned, we still will have a social media and digital marketing campaign coming out. Second to last slide, I'm sorry. We do partially sponsor the Small Business Development Center, as do several other cities, and so they have kind of a larger geography that they work with. The Small Business Development Center helps with one-on-one at no cost to businesses and entrepreneurs. So they help with everything from how do I get funding, or how do I set up a business plan, or I'm not really quite sure, what my market is, or, just kind of basic questions that businesses may have in order to get started and get running. And so as you can see here, we have the list divided into the city served as well as the demographics. And there was the highest, let's say 2 categories were African American owned businesses and women owned businesses that were coming and seeking help from the SBDC. I do have one of our business partners here. His name is Miguel Maestas. He is the Associate Director at El Centro de la Raza. And what we wanted to do is, this is quite a large development, and so he's going to keep it very short because we know that this is a very long meeting. I would encourage you to just review quickly the slide that's up on the screen or up on your screens to just get an overview of the phases as well as the timing. And I will just hand the microphone over to Miguel to speak to this.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon. Chair Tran, honorable council members, appreciate the opportunity to give you an update. I will be as brief as I can. Just to let you know, our Federal Way offices are fully open and we're providing services to the community, including a wide variety of services to children and youth. And since we purchased the Patterson Skate Rink and adjacent property, we continue investing in remodeling and revitalizing that space and hiring young people from the Federal Way community to work there. So the update on the development plans for the property there and across the street is phase 1 includes an indoor-outdoor mercado or marketplace, farmers market for local vendors, and also a very beautiful park design that will be part of that. And that will be just to the north of the parking lot of the Patterson Skate Rink on the image there on the far left. Phase 2 will be a new El Centro Community Center with offices, senior center, youth services, and then phase 3 will include 208 units of affordable workforce housing for individuals and families, 4 or more early learning childcare classrooms, and 3 commercial retail spaces. And the plan really is to develop a Federal Way campus that builds community by incorporating the elements of economic development, business opportunities, and new offices for programs and services, child development space, and affordable workforce housing that rivals new market rate housing construction with beautifully designed facades and art that is visually appealing and uplifts the neighborhood. So as for the timeline, over the next year, we're seeking pre-development funds with a tentative plan to start construction on Phase 1 next summer, 2024, which is the market and the park. And the good news is that we already have raised $4 million for Phase 1 from federal HUD appropriation from Representative Adam Smith and Senator Patty Murray. And these funds, however, can only be used for construction costs and not pre-development. And so the next 2 phases will commence based on when the funds are raised and to begin construction. But we've already started on that fundraising work. So we'll continue to provide updates to you, and we'd be happy to meet with you all anytime to provide more details. And want to just close by saying thanks to the Community Development and Planning team for letting us share briefly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and that was it. Are there any questions for myself or Mr. Maestas?
Paul, go ahead.
Who is our SBDC contact?
His name is Rich Shockley. I'd be happy to make an introduction to you if you'd like.
Please.
He's a good guy.
That's all.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. On the numbers that you gave on the vacancy rates, is that federal way or national? The first slide.
Let me see if I can. I'm not going to be able to get back there.
It was
Arrow? Oh, gotcha.
12.9%.
Oh, it was
office-
national, yeah.
National. Do you have federal ways rates?
I don't. That would be a little bit difficult to gather an accurate number, but I can certainly talk to a few brokers and see if they kind of have a feel for it just for Federal Way.
Okay. And under permitting, you mentioned office. So do we have new office buildings being permitted?
I will get you the addresses and the locations of those buildings.
And then any news on the Weyerhaeuser building, headquarter building? Anything going in?
Yeah, there's a lot of discussions that are going on. So there's nothing that's concrete, but there are a couple of concepts that are floating around, and there are some kind of whiteboard sessions and some discussions on what kind of, I guess, uses would be the highest and best use based on what kind of a unique facility it is. There's nothing that's really presentable right now in any kind of a way, shape, or form, but there are some discussions on, some type of a health and wellness concept, or some type of a, kind of R&D research facility. But again, it's a very unique property, and so it's not something that, and especially the way that work has evolved over the last decades, it's a very difficult space, or a very challenging space to demise and do tenant improvements in order to either break it down into smaller, businesses or such. And of course, better than I do, because of the construction of it. There are columns about every 12 feet in 2 of the lower levels, and so it just makes it very difficult to really use the space and demise it well.
And then I have 2 other quick questions. One, our sister city in Ukraine, I'd love to get an update on how they're doing, what we can do to help them.
Sure.
We haven't had any updates for well over a year. And secondly, at El Centro de la Raza, the indoor and outdoor market, is that similar to a public market?
Yes, it's basically a public market, so we'll have indoor and outdoor components, and vendors, public vendors will be able to come similar to a farmer's market. But it'll have an indoor component so that it'll also function in the winter months.
So it's year-round?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much for being here.
Mr. Dovey?
Yeah, a question on the, Mr. Shockley's, or what?
Rich?
Yeah,
Yep.
your graph that you had there?
Oh, yeah.
Could you just pull that up? I mean,
Getting better at this.
it seemed to me that, usually, let's see, okay. I mean, everyone there is considered a minority. Were there no white Anglo-Saxon men that came in?
I mean,
I mean, I'm just asking, maybe that's the wrong thing to ask, but I've never seen a graph that is 100%, I think it is, of everybody but 50, anyway.
It's not my numbers, and so I
Okay.
can't tell you. I can only say that there's no response to 3 and Veterans Reserve 4, so
Okay.
I couldn't speak to those numbers.
Okay, fine.
But it's quarter by quarter, so it changes, and it could just be that there's it's summertime, and so
Sure.
maybe there's a different trend in the summer.
I mean, it's a great
Yeah.
organization. They've done many things for many wondrous things, but I just found that a skewed graph. And the next thing, going to what we just talked about, I'll say it wrong, but the gentleman's here, the Mercado and everything we're doing down there. This is like the second or third presentation I've seen where on phase 3 is 208 units of affordable workforce housing. I don't even think we're zoned for that down there yet, so there needs to be probably some discussions sometime before we get way down the planning, and then, so I just
Correct.
bring that up.
Yep, correct.
Not that I think it's a bad idea, I just, surprises are always bad for everybody.
That is, yeah, you are correct, yep.
Okay,
And
thank you.
those, we have started those discussions in community
Okay.
development.
Thank you.
Yep.
Council President and then Mr. JW.
Thank you, Chair Tran. So with El Centro de la Raza, so that, I was going to ask that about the workforce housing. Is that supposed to be on that little triangular shaped property?
Yes, thank you. So actually, it's across the way where the little squares or rectangles are, and El Centro owns a piece of property there and is leasing a property with the first refusal to purchase, which we plan to do, and then also have informed the owner, which is the same owner, of interest in purchasing the rest of the property. So this is phase 3, given the ability to purchase that property and also to work with the city on zoning, proper zoning. for
So
that
it's
development.
actually across the street from the.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, and I'm just curious, is this all for just Hispanic-speaking folks?
No, this is available to everyone in the community.
Okay, and thank you very much, I appreciate that. Now I'm just going to talk to Tanya. Thank you very much, Miguel. I'm just curious, I have 2 more questions. What are your efforts to attract new businesses to Federal Way? What are you doing to do that?
So essentially what I'm doing right now is doing a business outreach. And so the foundation, I guess the philosophical foundation for economic development, the way that I practice it, is really building a solid business retention. So business in the city, and finding out what their needs are, finding out, what's top of mind for them. We have 3 questions that we'll be asking them in the next few weeks. So there's a partnership that we have with a call center that we received a grant for. So we will be contacting or reaching out to 500 businesses in the city. And so that's really the foundation, because essentially with business attraction, what should happen is that the businesses in the city are so satisfied with working here, and they've chosen to stay here, that any business that would come in should just be able to come in, talk to anybody, and kind of get a lay of the land. That being said, as far as business attraction goes, right now what I've been looking into is what I'm kind of informally calling it the healthcare continuum in Federal Way looks like. So what that landscape looks like, that appears to be the largest industry right now that we, have substantial, let's say, different parts of the ecosystem. So you've got everything from medical office buildings to larger hospitals to elder care, et cetera. And so I'm investigating that to see, what kind of supply chain needs there are, what kind of partnership and secondary and tertiary needs there are.
Okay, so I have an uncle who's passed away, but he was a major developer in downtown Portland. And when I talked to him about moving here, he said, send me the information you have, which at that time was a video. Do we still have a video to send to people to? Do we need to update a video?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a little bit more detailed of an answer. So the way that businesses actually look for places to relocate has become, in the last 10 years, it's changed quite a bit, and it's become a little bit more complicated. And to make it super simple, it's no longer in the business attraction game a matter of attracting businesses. It's more becoming a matter of attracting talent. And so really what the thought process and the way that economic development actually works now is more on the how do we make a place and how do we actually attract talent, and then the businesses actually are following talent. So another thing that we are really starting to look into is, who are the residents that live here? What types of jobs do they have? Because that's actually the type of information that businesses are interested in, is what's your workforce makeup, not only in your city, but in your catchment area. So for example, smaller businesses will have a smaller catchment area. Larger businesses like Amazon, they actually cycle through employees about 3 times a year. So that's a great example of why a business relocation is more about.
Okay, so you're collecting a lot of information right now is what you're doing.
And tailoring it, so if there is, if there are industries, it's less about the shotgun approach, but it's more about if healthcare is our
Okay.
focus.
Sure. So then I have, my final question is for business retention. And I've thought, I can understand that you're going to do a survey to 500 businesses, but my thought was that, and we've done this before, where we've had business town hall, where we had, usually it's not the business owners, it's usually the business managers who will come in and they'll talk about, areas of concern. For example, retail theft, or broken windows, or we had a small business where a truck was driven right through the front of the building, and how we can get them help. I mean, these people, it's happening to them more than once. And so I think at some point, if everybody agrees, we should have some kind of a summit meeting with our businesses to talk about how to help them.
Great. I have 2 great pieces of information for you. The first is that there's only 3 questions in the survey, and the last one, the question is, what keeps you up at night as a business owner? And this survey has been done in multiple other cities, and what actually happens is we're able to gather qualitative data on what the businesses actually need. And so when we get the results in, for example, I did the same survey in SeaTac, and we were able to determine what programs the businesses actually want and what they're suffering from the most. So that baseline study will be used every year to figure out what the businesses
Sure,
need
and
then
I
address
can
it.
understand that. That's a good thing, but I think we need to bring people together to talk.
And
Okay,
so the
so I
second
think-
part, and the second part is that in 2 weeks, we have our first roundtable, if you will, meeting with the downtown property owners. So the first meeting will be with all the property owners, so your Kimco's, your Schnitzers, your, everybody downtown, those property owners, to discuss with them what's happening and get their
Is
feedback.
that something you can invite the council to?
I can check into that and get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Jack, go ahead.
Right. Council President Honda basically asked one of my first questions was the comparison with the U.S. vacancy rates and stuff like that in Federal Way. It'd be great to know kind of how we compare there. Also, I think that what actually it was Deputy Mayor Honda, but what Council President Kochmar just said, I agree with it. It is good to have face-to-face, but I appreciate the work that you're doing. I understand that the mayor recently had a tour of the Weyerhaeuser things, and I think it would be great if when things like that happen, if the council could be invited for that also. I think that it'd be good for the council to be able to take a look, be involved with it. I mean, it extends the reach, and it educates us as well. So I think it'd be very good if we were able to participate with that, and also participate with this as the council president said, participate with this next one if it's appropriate.
Okay.
Back to El Centro de la Raza. I like the idea of what you're doing, but with the, having El Mercado and everything right there, I like the idea, but the location, such a busy intersection there. I mean, that's one of the busiest areas as far as traffic goes, not pedestrian traffic, but car traffic. And it seems like that some of the plans there that may be a challenge geographically. What are your thoughts on the response on that?
I think that is part of our pre-development work that needs to happen. Obviously, making sure that there's plenty of parking and that within that development, like that pedestrians are safe and there's good pedestrian flow. And also working with the planning department to see how, traffic flow or pedestrian flow might work. But that's definitely part of the pre-development work to make sure that it works for the purposes.
Yeah, you know, one of my concerns is with the mercado, you know, the market, is that, you know, normally the market, you know, I mean, lots of times there's families with kids and stuff like that, and it's just there in that little triangular corner. It's not a very kid-safe place, it seems to me.
Yeah, that's a
So
good point.
Those are my thoughts on it.
Yeah, we'll have to make sure that's absolutely take that into consideration and make sure that there's some mitigation that's there so that, you know, people can't run out into the street, or that, you know, there's some flow in and out.
So, okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Tanya, thank you for all you're doing.
Sure, thank you. Are there any other questions?
Deputy Mayor.
I'm curious if you're working with the Chamber of Commerce. Some of the things that you were saying about what type of jobs we have, where they're at, they've already received that information. They've already done the studies. So are you working with them and not repeating
Yep.
what they've done?
Yep, absolutely. Yep, and we are working together. They do have data on there, and so those are, so they use Esri, which I think is a great source, but there are also some other sources like the BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the census, et cetera, that we'd like to also kind of overlay some of the data in order to get kind of a better picture and kind of figure out what the baseline is for the data that we want to use consistently. So it's a conversation that I've started to have with the chamber president, but you know, it's an ongoing conversation, so we haven't come to any definitive, let's say, conclusions or decisions yet.
Okay, and on the construction permits, just to go back to that, I was under the impression that we had vacant office space and that developers were not interested in building office space here. So I would be really interested in finding out if that we are actually building more office space here.
Sure. And, you know, with office, that is just a generalized term. So it could be things like medical office buildings, things like that. So it's not necessarily like a high-rise with professional services, but I absolutely can get that information to you and the rest of council.
And one more question, when you talk about medical services, our hospital has for years been at capacity. And at one point, I believe Kaiser was looking at the potential of building a hospital here in the area. Have there been discussions from any other medical facilities of building another hospital here?
Not anyone. We've started to reach out to Kaiser for numerous discussions, but there's nothing that has been specifically discussed about any, at least from me. I haven't had any discussions, but I absolutely will put it on my list to investigate more about the hospital and the capacity here.
Okay, because as we grow as a city and as an area in South King County and North Pierce County, we will need more hospital space.
Absolutely. And I will check into that and get back to you on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jack, you have the light up? Oh, okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Okay.
Do you
I'm
have the
up here
next
for a bit.
item?
You're stuck with me for two more. The next is just informational, and it is essentially very quick, hopefully. It's just to inform council that the economic development part of the ARPA grants was woven into the bucket with human services. And so we have now separated those out, and now economic development is working on all of the economic development part of the funding. And so the first part of the funding was granted by council to set aside funds for a grant writer. And so we have put out a job announcement for a grant writer. The funds, as mentioned, were already approved for a grant writer in the ARPA package that was in the bucket with human services. And so what the idea and the goal is with this grant writer is to work in symphony or in concert with the finance department. And as you know, the finance department has a list that it keeps of projects that are looking for funding. And so instead of this grant writer going out and trying to find and figure out projects that may need funding, what we are working with the finance department is that any issues or challenges, or, if there's some supplemental budgeting or help that's needed, that the grant writer can work in conjunction and see if there are any grants available. And so the way that the grant writer will approach it is to essentially identify, like, what are the types of buckets at the federal level, at the state level, at the local level, at specialty levels. For example, economic development receives port grants from the Port of Seattle, so things like that. And as you know, grants and grant writing and grant finding is definitely a longer process, and so there are no guarantees, and there's no way to really, figure out if there's any funding available. But one of the things that we will be working with this grant writer on is to really try to define and articulate the projects and programs that we have in a way that we may be able to put together some budgeting. So more to come on that, and it will be a work in progress, and we will definitely keep you updated on it.
Mr. Dovey?
Will the grant writer have a quota, how much they're supposed to raise?
That's a great question, and I have been doing some research on grant finding, as I like to call it, and it's a little bit of a needle in a haystack, and it is, I think, difficult to kind of say, hey, you need to. It's not like donations and fundraising, which is going out to individuals and saying, hey, I need this money. It's actually going out, and it's like matching puzzle pieces together, right? So. I don't want to get too much into the details of it, and I can certainly take it offline, but essentially it's like finding a needle in a haystack. Like there's not going to be a grant out there that says, hey, if you have 7,000 square feet in this geography that we have a grant for you. You kind of have to piece it together.
But the reason I asked the question is grant writing's like advertising. You never know what you're going to get. And if you don't have an idea of what you want to get in return, I want $5 million or $10 million or whatever the ratio is, then we're just got somebody writing grants. So there's got to be some sort of number we expect before somebody comes on, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'll flip it just a little bit, and instead of looking for a number like 5 million or 10 million, what we're doing is working with finance, and we're working with projects that all the different departments have identified as being projects that are needed. So it's marrying a project with money rather than saying we just want this amount of money, because then you have to end up creating a project to assign the money. And so it's the same outcome, right?
I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah, we are.
There's got to be a dollar
exactly.
quota. Somehow.
It would be a project quota. So it would be,
quota.
hey,
There
how
has
many
to be,
projects?
there has to be a way to quantify that it was successful.
Correct. And it will be a learning process. So absolutely we'll keep you updated, but I agree with you on metrics. We will definitely figure out some metrics that we can measure by.
Is the grant writer going to be an employee, or they're contracted, company, or how is this set up?
It's a contract position, and that's just due to the way that ARPA is set up. And so the contract position would run roughly 15 months through the end of 2024. So limited term contract position. But I think maybe to Councilman Dobie's point, I think it's a great opportunity for us to see, like, how does this actually work, and can it be something that we can really leverage in the city.
Gotcha. And then I'm looking at the ARPA spreadsheet at the moment, and we've got a grant coordinator and a grant writing services, but there's a huge price difference that we put allocated to it. Do you know what the actual grant we've allocated towards this? Because I see $300,000, I see $784. So what is the amount that we've actually allocated towards this grant writer?
So this particular position has a salary range of $74,000 to $94,000, and then with benefits, it's roughly it's a pretty big number, 102 to 130, because it's about 38%, of the salary is what the benefits are that get tacked on. So the other, I guess maybe side note is that this position was filled at the beginning of the year, and the ARPA funding was already assigned last year, or maybe even the year before, and so there is a little bit of a lag there.
And then is it possible to get that wish list so we can see kind of what we have planned out or what we're looking at shooting for?
Yeah, I can coordinate with finance on that.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I was just going to ask about that. So this was, when ARPA started, we did put money into this position, and we had someone for a very short time. So there's got to be money that was put in there that could maybe possibly extend the position past 24?
I would love to be able to say yes, but unfortunately, the stipulations on ARPA funding are very strict on the obligation period and the performance period. So we can't extend it past that. And I'll actually defer to our finance.
As far as ARPA funds, it has to be expended before 2024, but that aligns perfectly with the next biennium's budget, so we'll be able to make a budget decision at that time and see if we want to fund it out of other ways.
So then will there be money not spent on this position because it's been vacant that goes back into ARPA that we need to reallocate?
So, do you mind if I? So
Whoever.
that's a great question, and I am just in the middle of conversations with the team to hopefully get on the council agenda in September to present what economic development is doing for with the ARPA funding. And so what the plan would be is to integrate anything that might be left over on that into supporting the business community with programs that are either identified in the business outreach survey that we do or business programs that we've researched from the business community that are necessary.
Okay, thank you.
All right, no more question on that subject.
Okay, one more, and I'm looking to Thomas to help me so I don't mess up. So I'll just start sharing before or while he's getting that up. So there was a request at the last council session to provide a little bit more detail on the tourism enhancement grant that was provided to the Pacific Raceways, which is just east of us on Highway 18. And they are sponsoring, or they did sponsor this past weekend, the National Hot Rod Association Northwest Nationals. And there were approximately 30,000 people that were at the event. I do apologize because some of these slides and your text may be in the future tense, and it was just this past weekend, so apologies on that. But essentially just wanted to give a high-level overview of the actual facility. And so it is a facility of regional significance. And so essentially it was a track that was built by the Fioria family in 1960, and it is a multi-purpose track. I love cars, so if anyone loves cars, it's a great place to go. They have 3 major facilities there. There's the racetrack, there's also a motocross track, and there's also a go-kart track. And it's a pretty cool area. The one part that I did want to also call your attention to is they are developing an innovation center, and it's a 200,000 square foot innovation center. And so what that really is it's a center that is focusing on future tech, clean tech, anything that has to do with mobility. And so that's also, something I think of interest that we can keep note of because there may be some synergies with some upcoming things in Federal Way. The other noteworthy metrics is that they have over 300 events a year. And so because it is kind of the only type of course of its kind, it is something that does draw from, 50 miles away, 100 miles away, over in Canada, down in Oregon, across in Idaho. So it is definitely something that's very interesting for Federal Way to partner with. And I won't go into all the numbers here, but you can see that there's some fairly good metrics here on, who actually knows and goes to the raceway. This as well, wanted to point out, this is the event that was this past weekend, the NHRA Northwest Nationals. It was a 3-day event. And so between Auburn and Federal Way and Kent, between Kent and Auburn, there's about, less than 20 hotels. And so if you kind of do the math on about 50,000 people, which, those hotels aren't able to manage that capacity, that's one of the other reasons why Federal Way really is developing this partnership. First off for that, but second off, the Pacific Raceways is looking at expanding the facilities at the track, which could mean at some point that they are able to host up to 100,000 people at events. And so again, that is something that is regionally significant for us, that from the tourism side, economic development side, I don't think I need to go into the math on this, what that, the implications are for us, but it is pretty significant for us. So we're very grateful, and I think the Pacific Raceways is very grateful for the consideration from council, because this is definitely something that's significant for us in the future. I won't go into reading all the details on this, but suffice to say that Federal Way actually got on Fox News. The mayor attended on Saturday, and he was interviewed by, or sorry, not Fox News, Fox Sports, the Fox Network. He was interviewed by the Fox Sports Network, and then it was rebroadcast, and so Federal Way did get some talking points on there. We also had banners that were regularly shown on the TV coverage, and you can see here there's some pretty significant TV coverage. And then we're also, our hotels are featured on the Pacific Raceways website. We also featured a lot of information on our Visit Federal Way website, which was also on the banners. And so participants that were there could actually go to the website immediately on site and do some research themselves. We also, some of you were, I think, there, hosted a drag and drive event on the Thursday before, so last Thursday. We got some great drone coverage of the pack. We had probably between 50 and 75 people that came. It was a pretty short notice event that happened, but we were waiting to get some metrics back on social media to see, what kind of coverage there was on social media. But we were definitely featured on the Pacific Raceways digital media as well, which was really nice. So we got a really significant amount of publicity there. The kind of again, the estimate was that we got over, almost $200,000 worth of advertising for the investment that we made. So it was pretty good turnout, and more to come on that. And that is all for my presentations.
Real quick, so you had, how many hotels are in Kent and in Albany? You said 20-ish. Do you know what the actual count is? Or can I get a
I
list?
don't know the exact count. I can certainly get that to you, but it's less than 10.
Less than, combined?
Yeah, well, Auburn has like, I think 8. Again, don't quote me on the exact number now, but like, and I think Kent has about 8 or 9, but I can get the exact number.
Yeah, if you could, I'd be curious to get a list for those two cities in Federal so I can see which brands are out there. And then, do we have a count on heads and beds or site hits from the advertisement to see how that kind of penciled out for us so far?
That's a great question, and it's really kind of impossible to give an exact number because, as you know, when you check into hotels, you don't necessarily tell the people why you're there.
Yeah.
The only way you can really tell is if you block hotel rooms, but that's a whole other level with hotels. And during the summer months, to block hotel rooms, it takes a longer negotiation, and et cetera, et cetera. And so there's a lot more that is involved in that, and some hotels may choose to participate, some others not. So short end of the stick is you can't exactly do a one-to-one count, but there's also a lot of secondary and tertiary effects for events like this. And so, what the general rule is, have events, have activities, have things happening, and people will come. And, the other effect of it, of course, is, right, sales tax dollars and making purchases, which we also are very happy about.
Is there any quantitative tracking if we do these in the future, we like build out that program? What would we be using to track the returns on that or the investment, or if it was penciled out or not?
Yep, a lot of different metrics, and we can certainly discuss that offline, but essentially, with digital marketing now, it is essentially, it's not like in the old days where you could do one-to-ones. It's very complicated and complex. And so what we need to do, and this is kind of what we did on this case, is we figured out what are the metrics that we want to have on the front end. And then as you figure out what the metrics are you want to have on the front end, you can track that through, but it's really hard after the fact to kind of try to retroactively figure out metrics. But if there are,
What
like,
were the front-end metrics you guys had then on this one? Was that the information you gave us on what was that part?
yeah, so here, these are all the benefits, right? So essentially having 1 million viewers, right? And then also being on the fence for the signage, and then also, everything that's on there. And, also the signage is going to stay up, and all of the hotels are going to stay up on their website. So that's, again, it's kind of hard, with all of these different areas. What you're trying to do is just meet people in different areas so they kind of repeatedly see the message.
Gotcha.
And as we get more into
Disruptive
this.
advertising?
Yeah, so as we get more into this, we will absolutely start to refine things. So there is more to come, and it will become more refined and more clear. And we're working with Thomas and his team as well, and with our communications team to kind of work on that in the future for you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you for all those information, Tanya.
Thanks.
All right, we are now moving on to item.
Committee Chair
I.
Tran, I believe Councilmember
I have a
Dawson has
comment.
her hand raised.
Oh, we don't see her. She has a hand
Oh, okay, sorry, I didn't see your
Hi.
hand. Lita, go ahead.
No worries. Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes,
can
we
hear
can.
you.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you, Tanya, for all the presentations. And my comment is going to be like Councilmember Walsh, I believe, said earlier. I believe when there are events, we should be invited to those. And I know the mayor was at the Raceway or some over the weekend. And the reason I'm saying this, not only to invite council, but with this TEG funds or grants, I believe of the LTAC committee members would be invited also to these kinds of events. I think would be great, just because I would like for them to be part of seeing, not just giving out the grants, but also seeing what it does. And so this particular one, I think would have been great because there was some hesitancy within the committee at the time because we were giving them such a large sum of money. And I think just for them to see it rolled out and what it's doing would be great. I know you probably would give this report to the committee, but whenever there are events, I think council and whoever is involved in the process should see the benefit or the fruit of their work. So just a comment to add to what Councilmember Walsh said earlier during your other presentation. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Lydia. Okay, now we are moving on to item I, surface water CCTV equipment replacement, EJ. Welcome.
So good evening, Council. I will start by saying this is nowhere near as exciting as Tanya's items. But that said, so the surface water CCTV system currently is a homemade trailer that the city started in 2010 and outfitted internally. So this is the trailer that you see out on the streets that actually televises mostly stormwater systems to find out where the systems clog when we have floods. And, you know, on a routine basis, it's used to figure out where roots are, figure out where pipe breaks are, where intrusions from gas mains or electric mains when they've cross-bored are. So this system's at the end of its life. It was included in the 2024 budget for replacement in the amount of $270,941. It is off the federal contract, the Sourcewell contract, as a complete system. So instead of piecemealing a system together, when we looked at this, it's actually cheaper for the city to buy a ready-made system that's purpose designed for this. So it comes with it's a full-blown truck that comes with the whole TV system incorporated in it. The 270 number was the active number at the time when the budget was approved. However, since that time, the price has gone from $270,000 to $285,000, which when you add tax, means that the new budget is $314,000 for this needed piece of equipment. So with that, we are asking for a $50,000 increase in the budget authority to purchase this. That funding is proposed to come out of the SWIM utility, so this is not a general fund impact. This would come out of SWIM. We do have savings in that account this year between a couple staff vacancies, as well as because the system isn't really 100% operational, we haven't done some of the maintenance we were intending to do with this piece of equipment. So there are savings within the existing budget to cover this. And like I said, this is from restricted surface water utility funding. Just for a point of order, just so the council's aware, this is slated as a 2024 replacement, so for next year. So the lead time on this item is about 15 months. So we need to get them a purchase order so that which locks in our price as well. But it also more or less puts us in line to receive it in 2024. We are not asking to bring this forward into 2023. We're asking for permission to lock the price and make it so we can actually do what we said we would do in the budget and replace this in 2024. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, EJ. Any question for EJ?
I just have two, SWM, what does that stand for?
Surface water management.
Okay. And then how often do we use it? It sounds like we use it quite a bit. Since 2010, is it used constantly throughout the year? Or?
Pretty much 6 days a week, year round.
Wow. That's all I have.
Thank you. I think we're ready for
Yeah.
motion.
Can I make a motion that I move to authorize staff to increase the budget for the surface water CCTV equipment replacement and move it to the August 8th, 2023 council consent agenda?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The matter passed 3-0. Thank you,
Thank you.
EJ. Okay, now we are moving on to item J, Parks Department vehicle purchase. Jason, welcome.
Good evening, Chair Tran and council members. Policy question I have for you tonight is, should the city council approve the purchase of a third vehicle and allocate and authorize a $35,000 transfer of King County levy money to fund the balance to purchase vehicles for the new parks maintenance staff hired as part of the 2023 budget? And so, a couple of weeks ago in the last budget adjustment, there was $75,000 allocated out of ARPA funds. In the 2023-2024 budget, this council approved 3 new maintenance workers for us. At the time of the budget, there was not money available to purchase trucks for those staff. And so after bringing staff on, they've been doubling up, and that worked well for the first 3 months as they're getting orientated and that sort of thing. But as time wears on, we want to improve effectiveness and efficiency. And the way we do that is to staff them or give them a vehicle to make the rounds. And so with that being said, this is just allocating a little bit of additional money to fund the full purchase of 3 vehicles for those new staff members. And with that, I would entertain any questions.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. So I've asked this before, but not of you. I think it was of Public Works. We have bought quite a few new vehicles over the last 3 years, many with ARPA money. And I'm concerned when we do our next budget about how we're going to manage the replacement funds for all those vehicles. But saying that, do we need to purchase new vehicles, or could we purchase used vehicles that are in good condition?
And so, to my knowledge, I believe the way the policies are set up is that we don't purchase used vehicles. That's not in the purchasing guidelines. But I would have to, I can't quote all that to you right now,
Okay.
but that's to my knowledge of it. We do purchase new vehicles.
And does every Parks employee need their own vehicle? They don't have shift work that they?
Not every Parks employee has their own vehicle. Most full-timers have their own vehicle. The problem is we bring on an addition of 30 seasonal employees in the summer, and so that's where we gain effectiveness with those additional vehicles. And just to share one comment with you, I got an email from Parks Manager George Richin this morning. We had a picnic reservation that was set up at Sacagawea Park over the weekend, and that picnic reservation decided to move the rock and drive their vehicles into the park. And one of his comments to me was, kind of that shortage of vehicles, we didn't have the staffing or the effectiveness to go around and make more than 1 rounds to that park over the weekend. Hence, had we had vehicles in that, we can send somebody through, get more eyes on park, and prevent some of that negative interactions that occur in our park. And so we are losing effectiveness and efficiency without having the vehicles.
Do staff take their vehicles home?
No, ma'am.
So the vehicles are parked at a location, which we don't need to publicize where the location
Correct.
is, but, and they weren't available over the weekend? Or we didn't have enough park staff?
And that's a good question, and I don't know that I have directly the answer to
Okay.
that, but that was a comment that was made to me in an email today, and thought I would share that.
Okay, thank you.
Paul?
I want to actually start with that park comment. So my understanding is the reason that you think the vehicles would be beneficial and effective is this weekend would have been an example where potentially having one more vehicle would have given you guys eyes on the rock issue sooner, or, and again, the same question I have is, actually, I'll start with, how many vehicles do we have actually in the fleet for you guys?
and I want to say it's 22, but I would have to, I'd have to look at the vehicle equipment list. That's changed over time, and when I look at the vehicle equipment list, I'm not just looking at pickup trucks or vehicles. I also look at tractors, utility vehicles, and the like.
Citywide, we've got 242 vehicles. That's citywide. You're just looking at parks, though.
Yeah, yeah, and that's
Including-
where I can't speak specifically. to the
That's
number of-
including the
of
police
actual
department, right?
trucks.
That's including the police department? Okay. So check. So the other one is just out of curiosity, what is the true cost? It's $3,500 to purchase it. What would our annual cost be for that one? And then what is our average time, annual cost, just a ballpark? Do you have a clue? It's $35 to purchase it, but
I'm not the fleet manager, and so what we're looking for out of this request is, and Parks has looked at varying staff. We're not looking at buying F-250s. We looked at some small of these Prima vehicles that are a little bit more smaller, compact. Nissan makes one, thinking to see if that could bring down the cost, a lower way to do it. Part of the problem with those vehicles is they are street legal, but they can't exceed 25 miles an hour. That was a little bit too low of a mile per hour for our staff, safety-wise, because they do need to get out on some roads, that sort of thing. We don't have the money to, so, we're trying to take the money we have allocated and give our department the best bang for its buck. And so where we lined up with is Public Works Director E.J. Walsh let us know that there was a short window and an opportunity to get the new Ford Maverick pickup truck. And we used to have Ford Rangers, which was that smaller chassis vehicle in our fleet. We don't have a lot of those anymore because the Rangers went away. The Maverick is kind of the replacement for that size. And so we just recently surplused the Ford Rangers that we had, went away, and so we don't have these lighter, smaller vehicle trucks, and that the Maverick provides that. So with the $75,000 in ARPA appropriation, the additional $35,000 gives you a grand total of $110,000 for the purchases. The vehicles on state contract are coming in just under $30,000. I think it's $29,533 is the price for the Mavericks. So that's three of those times three, but then you have a little bit of the upfitting charges, which is your headache rack, your decals, the safety beacon, and so that's where the little bit of additional money is to upfit those trucks. Do we think we'll probably be a little under that, but that 110 gives us that room we need to make that full purchase.
Gotcha. And then, so it's not actually the 3 employees are getting 3 new vehicles, it just happened to be the same time 3 employees came on, you looking for 3 vehicles?
That's correct. If you followed Federal Way Parks Department for a long time, we've improvise, overcome, and adapt to get things done, and we've had a historic staffing shortages. The city council has recognized that and gave us that additional allocation of employees this year. I had made a comment to City Administrator Brian Davis and Finance Director Steve Groom that please don't give us people without the vehicles. Unfortunately, it tends to be where the Parks Department lands a lot of times. We'll ask for things and we'll only get a partial fulfillment of those asks. And so then we do our best to take what we get and do our best with it. For many years, we have kept old surplus trucks that were supposed to go down the road and kept them because we brought on a new staff and it was a truck for that staff member to have. Well, in the long run, that a lot of times that's eating operations money for us, because since that is a surplus vehicle, oil changes, repairs, that sort of thing doesn't get charged to the fleet budget. The park's operation has to pay for that. And so EJ has really helped us. What I've said for a few years is we have a structural imbalance in the Parks Department, in our fleet, in our equipment. And past 5 years, EJ has worked diligently to help us through the ARPA funds and some other means to get out of this surplus truck business, keep them on the replacement reserve list, but yet give us the equipment and vehicles we need to be able to, number one, just do an effective job. Then once we get effective, then we can start talking about being a little more efficient.
So is the budget gonna be the fleet that's purchasing it, and then does the maintenance fall underneath the fleet, or does it fall underneath you guys then?
So if it's a vehicle in the fleet pool, fleet pays for that ongoing maintenance.
Okay.
But if the
Well,
vehicle has
these-
been surplused and it's basically taken off of the spreadsheet for the fleet, but we still keep it, they don't pay for any of that damage or repairs that needs to be done. That is on the department.
How many
to
surplus do
handle
you
it.
guys have right now?
I don't know that
don't
off the
know?
top of my head.
Most
I should know that
yeah.
information for you right now. I don't.
Are most of your vehicles fleet though now?
Yeah, I want to say if we've got maybe one or two surplus vehicles, that would be about where it is. We definitely have a surplus tractor or two that are still on the books.
Okay.
Maybe utility cart, but as far as trucks and vehicles, I believe we're down to the very end. At one time, we had 6 or 8 surplus vehicles. So-
And if this, if we do okay this purchase, do you think there's another vehicle coming down the pipeline? Because like they said, the ARPA funds, when they dry out, we have a lot of assets that we're gonna have to be responsible for without replacement budgets for it. So what is your mindset on this?
I don't currently have a need for additional vehicles, but I do have a need for additional people. And if we have additional people, to me, it's a package deal. If we bring somebody into City Hall, we don't bring them into City Hall and not give them a computer, right? They need a workstation, they need a place to work. That truck is my Parks Maintenance workers' office. That's their cubicle. And so that's why we still need more Parks Maintenance staff. And if we're fortunate enough to get additional maintenance staff, I am going to be requesting truck for those because they come hand in hand.
Just so I know from my knowledge of the future, so we have about 30, I'm going to round up 40,000 for truck in the future. What would an employee cost be? So when I think about it, I know that an employee cost is actually included with, the truck should be included with that kind of concept.
It just depends because benefits are a big factor.
What are these last 3 that came in? What was the average?
Their average wage or
Yes.
wage plus benefits?
Plus benefits, total package.
And that, I don't have plus benefits, but you're usually 30%, and so these guys are on union scale. I can tell you that most of them were brought in at B step. There were 1 or 2 that had exemptional credentials and were brought in at the C step.
I don't know what that means. What's that number?
And again, we have a union chart,
Yeah.
and I can't just spit out every, at entry level A, B, C, and D. They have a monthly salary that's tied to that, and so I don't have it memorized. We go to that chart and we make offers that way. I can tell you that to get the C rate, I'm sorry, go ahead, Steve.
Councilmember McDaniel, if I could corroborate his story, I think at the budget time, we did greenlight some staff and we weren't able to provide them vehicles, and so what we did is we put the vehicles on the waiting list and said, we'll come back as the year plays out, maybe we can greenlight some vehicles, and that's exactly what we're doing. And I have to actually own a large part of the problem, because one of the reasons that the fleet has been stretched for their useful lives has been to economize, and so finance has to own that. And I hear it very loudly, and I've been working with the Parks Department and the Public Works Department and also PD, because we do want to start budgeting better and have a more long-term perpetual replacement plan that'll work better for us. So
I agree with that, but
I'll own that.
For budgeting purposes, I'd like to know what my actual cost would be if I pick up an employee and having the salary basic understanding and then a vehicle knowing that they're going to want a vehicle for it.
Right.
Gives me an actual budget in my mind I can play with.
Yeah, and I think we had that at budget time, and I'm not coming up with it off the top of my head.
And I don't want to speak out of turn, but I can give you a raise. You're probably, your salaries are in the $75,000 range. You're probably looking at another $35,000 to $40,000 in benefits. And then you're going to have, depending on the style of truck you're looking at, you're probably looking at, if you're a Maverick, you're $30,000. If you're an F-250, you're in the $70,000 range for that vehicle.
Okay.
So
that's what I
that
was
gives you a ballpark, but
Yeah.
I just don't want to commit to firm numbers without having them in front of me.
175 is what I kind of hear is what I get a ballpark for. so I get
Totally
that.
understand.
All right, thank you.
Jack?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with buying the trucks, but I think Mavericks are a little cheesy. I don't think they're gonna last very long. I mean, it would seem to me, I'd be more apt if you came and said, hey, we need Ford F-150s or 250s or something, but maybe only you need one of these little box trucks that's gonna fall apart pretty soon, but, I mean, I'm okay with it, but it just seems like a pretty, I don't know, it's got kind of a minimalist ask for a product that, in my opinion, is probably gonna be thrown away quicker than something that's a real truck, but that's.
Well, and that's where, as we look at it, we can't get the
You
Ford
don't have
Ranger
to, you don't have to
anymore.
comment on it, I'm just
Okay.
making a comment.
Fair enough.
I mean, there's no reason to keep beating a dead horse.
Sure, and Councilmember, if I can jump in for a second, if it's okay with the chair. We looked at 150s and 250s. I think ideally they would request 250s with Tommy gates and everything else. The Mavericks have the same engine as the 150. It's on the same chassis coming out of the same factory. It is replacing the Ranger. We used the Rangers for up 10 years and they worked well, but they went out of production off state contract, which is why we stopped using them. We never really had a problem with the Rangers as far as functionality for what we're using it for within this context. Obviously, you don't have the towing capacity. There are, to your point, some limitations with these trucks. But to use them for something like picking up litter and having a truck to move staff around, whether it's streets or parks, you know, frankly, they are slightly more fuel efficient. It is the same engine. It meets those requirements. So we had the Rangers, most of our Rangers lasted 15 plus years. So I think we've vetted this. There's other agencies that are using the same trucks. So staff looked at that pretty extensively. I don't think there's a concern on that. And certainly stylistically, I'm kind of in your camp. But, you know, we got to live within our means too.
If they'll work, I'm okay with it.
All right, I don't see any lights. May I have a motion, please? This one.
I move to forward the proposed purchase of a third vehicle and allocate a $35,000 transfer of a Keene County levy money to fund the balance to the August 8, 2023 consent agenda for approval.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Matter passed 3-0.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you for that. And Jason, you have the next item, AVAX control upgrades and performance management services.
I do, and thank you. This policy question is, should the city council approve the proposed request for bids for HVAC control upgrades and performance management services for City Hall, the Federal Way Community Center, and the Performing Arts Center? As part of the 23-24 budget, council appropriated monies to update the City Hall HVAC system, which is fairly antiquated. Out of 77 VAV boxes, we only have 20 controls that are modern day technology. The rest literally are similar to a Commodore 64, which was outdated decades ago. So with that being said, long overdue upgrades for this building. It's directly what ARPA money was allocated for. With that being said, the state has also implemented clean building technology requirements for buildings, and so bringing all three systems, HVAC system, into that clean energy technology and doing the data analytics and reporting for that will be included in this. Additionally, there will be some minor work done on a couple of the VAVs at the community center and potentially a compressor at the PAC. But all that work is based on the bids, and we are simply just asking for your permission to go out to bid the project that you guys have already funded in the budget.
Thank you, Jason. Jack?
Yeah, I move to forward the proposed request bids for the August 8th, 2023 consent agenda.
Oh, you have a question, right?
I just have one quick question on it.
In a second.
When the bids come across, are they itemized out? And then the other question was, I'll put together, is the main purpose to put them into a master control so you have one central location they all feed back into?
For City Hall, we have the master system, and it's just the controls communicating back. The other two systems, we don't have that front-end capacity, and that's a big component of that. That also gives you the ability to do the data and analytics and make that clean building reporting.
And then for the Federal Community Center, is it a separate, this has nothing to do with?
This has nothing to do with the locker rooms. The locker room upgrades and dehumidification that will need to come will be part of that bid that we're looking to bring to you here soon.
All right, then I'll second.
Do we need to repeat the motion, or?
Usually just point of order, it's motion, then a second, then discussion is what we're talking about here, but I don't think that there's any confusion about what the motion is.
Okay. Well, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Matter passed 3-0. Thank you,
Thank you for
Jason.
your support, Council.
Thank you. Thomas, you have the next two items. The first one is purchase of 14 RR GTAC laptops for the police department.
All right, just bringing up a couple notes here. Good evening, Chair Tran, committee, council members, deputy mayor, council president. Before you tonight are two items, and they are eerily similar. The only difference is the purpose and how they're being funded. So they're identical equipment. Long story short, it is GTAC laptops. It's the brand of laptop that we put in the police cars. They're hardened or ruggedized to be able to handle the harsh environment that is a patrol car. So we buy them as detailed in your agenda packet. The normal laptop itself, plus a bumper 5-year extended warranty, which is perfectly timed with the replacement cycle on these laptops. Vehicle adapter so we can power them, and then a docking station to actually dock them into the car so they can be removed as well. And then we add tax on that, and you can see the total cost. So each B360 laptop with the dock adapter and the warranty is $4,624 when you add it all together as one piece. So there are two items before you. The first one is the purchase of 14. These are being funded from replacement reserves, capital replacement, and so these are replacing 14 old laptops out of the cars, and we're going to put the new laptops in. And then just to give you a preview of the next item, it's the 11 that we're buying. Those ones are being funded because we're expanding the police fleet based on council's approval by 11 vehicles. So if we expand it by 11 vehicles, we need 11 new computers. So that's the only difference between the two items. One's being funded for replacement, the other one's being funded for additional vehicles. And that is it. We're buying them off of a state contract state procurement contract, formerly called NCPA. It's called Omnia Partners now. Council has done that. It's an intergovernmental purchasing agreement, and it's being purchased by a company called Bright. So, with that, are there any questions?
Any question for Thomas?
I do have a question.
Jack?
We're purchasing a 3-year warranty?
5-year total. So
5
they
year?
come with 3, and then we extend it for 2.
Okay, so it comes with 3 and we're adding 2 more?
Yes.
How often do we ever use the other 2 years of the warranty?
You'd be surprised.
That's why I'm asking the question.
I don't, so to be honest, I wish I had more statistics for you, but I can tell you that pretty much every month we're sending back a couple laptops. And then, of course, as they age, they get more and more. And the reason, so the cool part about this warranty, and I'm surprised they're still doing it, is it is literally bumper to bumper. So if there's anything that happens to it, keys fall off, screens get shattered, ports get jammed up all the time, like USB ports, people jamming things in and out of it. The patrol vehicle is a harsh environment. There's no doubt about it. Things get spilled on it. We buy them, they're ruggedized, but they still get destroyed. And so at the end of 5 years, it is definitely time to replace them. So it is a cost-effective thing to have that warranty.
And do we have, what, a 5-year replacement on these? Is that what we do?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. Do they stay in the police vehicle?
So majority of the time they do. However, they can be, with that dock, it allows them to just grab, unlock it. The officers have the key to unlock it, and then they can grab the laptop and go with it. Because they all have Wi-Fi. If they are doing reports at one of the substations or here where there's Wi-Fi, they can do that in the comfort of those buildings or at home. They are all encrypted, and we have them 2-factor authentication for security purposes. So when they do leave the secure environment of a police car for CJIS compliance, we have everything needed for that. So answer is yes, they can be removed, but majority of the time they stay in the car.
So let's say an officer comes back here to write a report. He or she can keep the computer in the car, come into the station and use another device.
Yeah, we have that. We have 6 patrol report writing room computers downstairs for the officers to use.
Okay, thank you.
For that purpose, yeah.
So, the other question I have is, we're buying Havas. I see that.
Yep.
Which I've been to their factory many times. Do we ever thought about being our own distributor from those guys and eliminating the markup on that type of product? I mean, have the cities ever got together and said, hey, why don't we buy so many of these, why don't we just not cut out the middleman on that kind of stuff?
I don't know if we can be our own distributor because we wouldn't be selling them, but if you've got ideas, I'd be happy to. I've long since had a thought of starting up a private business and doing this because.
I mean, I know what those cost, and I see what we're paying.
Yeah.
And so that means everybody in King County is probably paying more than they, I don't know, it's just a thought.
Yeah, so this is, all of these are off-state contract. We are using Havas. We switched from Gamber Johnson because the Gamber Johnsons we felt were, based on the experience that we had, more unreliable and not as well built. They were great for a while, and the Havas is just a much cleaner, better system for us at this point. But if you've got an idea of how we can become a distributor to cut out the middleman, I'm all for it.
All right, look like we don't have any other question for Thomas. May I have a motion, please?
We're doing just the first one then?
Yeah, the first one.
I move to forward the proposed purchase of 14 replacement laptops for the police vehicles to the August 8, 2023 consent agenda for approval.
Second.
Okay, great. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The matter passed 3-0. Thank you, Thomas. The next one, the purchase of 11 Gtech laptop for police department.
Can I just make a motion?
Yes, go.
Yeah, I'd like to make the motion that we approve the purchase of 11 Gtech laptops for the police vehicles
Second. It's, sorry, wrong motion.
and move it to the consent agenda, excuse me.
Yeah.
Second?
Okay.
Is that okay, Ryan? Okay.
Do I have to do it again? Did I do it wrong?
Keep it clean.
So the motion is,
Oh, I was looking at the wrong one. I'll read it one more
Okay.
time. I move to forward the proposed purchase of 11 Gtech laptops for police vehicles to the August 8th, 2023 consent agenda for approval.
Second.
All right, okay, we got this right. Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, the matter passed 3-0. Thank you, Thomas.
Welcome.
All right. We are moving on to item O, ordinance 2023-2024 budget amendment. Steve, welcome.
Thank you, committee members, council members, and staff that is still sticking around, because when I bring in a budget amendment, there is a little something for everybody, and I'm not saying that every department's on the edge of their seat, but it does matter. And I am in a position to offer you $1 million question if you've peeked in your packet. We actually have a question I'll be looking for direction for in the range of $1 million. Every month, I bring those revenue graphs that show you how the revenue's coming in. And what we do is at this point, we are closing the books on June. And so we are halfway through the year, and year-to-date, halfway through the year. If we look at the 5 largest revenue streams that the city has, and we compare it to the budget, we have a variance that they are all positive. They are all positive variances to budget. However, during the first quarter, we used some of that, so that means that we have available to us for a second quarter adjustment of nearly $1.8 million. Now, I'm only proposing a budget amendment that takes about 60% of that, because I have $1,070,000 to propose to you, which I will walk through as follows. I just wanted to show you where the money comes from. First off, the $70,000 of that $1,070,000 that I just referenced, Vanessa, our HR department has done a citywide labor market study across all of the non-represented positions, and she's proposing to make all of the changes to the non-represented positions that will bring them up to market rate. I think that's a really important thing to be able to do for our recruitment and our retention. 70,000 would take care of this year, and then 2024 we will be able to cover that in the following year just as easily. Now, the remainder of these adjustments are in other funds. These are all restricted funds, but they're interesting. The 540,000 government access channel, that is actually city council chambers, audio and visual. That's funds that are restricted by PEG, that's Public Educational Government Fund. So that's restricted fund. Thomas has done the equipment, whatever analysis that we need, and so we want to bring that and make that spendable in the budget. The next item is, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, PROS plan. That's a Steel Lake Master Plan, and that's funded by the Paths and Trails Fund. The Amanda upgrade, system upgrade, that's our permitting software. And that is an upgrade and interface fund that our IT department needs to do, and that will be released out of our technology fund. PCERN radio, what I can tell you is that is to upgrade 133 police radios. And again, that's funded by the restricted IT fund. 16,000 for EOC. EOC is our Emergency Operations Center. We recently did a desktop exercise, and Kevin Pelly is pretty excited that his grant got a little additional funding. He can purchase some new monitors to outfit the command center there with some new screens so they can increase the amount of information that they're able to get on live during an event. And then lastly, our fleet fund had a small request for bomb disposal equipment. All of those funds have got the money in them. It's a simple thing. We just need to bring them to you for approval. If you have questions, I think we've got the right people here to answer those questions. But there's that other $1 million that I mentioned that is coming out of revenue that has come in over budget. Recently, we talked about greenlighting some money out of ARPA, and some of you on council said, well, is there still an avenue to be able to do field turf? Yes, there is. I have a funding package here that would be, if we use $1 million from the general fund, 1.4 million out of lodging tax, and that is out of the lodging tax fund balance that has been built up, I believe, expressly for this purpose. There's also money in Path and Trails Fund, and then there's also in the Parks CIP. There's also some general fund savings, and I could put together a package that would say, let's apply that $1 million to this, and we could make it happen. However, in talking to the mayor and the city administrator, we have some other options I want to also bring to your attention, because there's some competing priorities, which is exactly the policy question we would want to bring to city council when we're weighing options at a policy level. As you know, we're going to be acquiring land for the operations and maintenance facility. And, this is a really weak option, but I bring it up because $1 million would allow us to avoid debt. I think the construction of the facility itself is going to be $34 million, and then you add the fuel system and the fleet operations for the repair and maintenance part of it. There's also an acquisition of land that we have yet to do, and I think we have $42 million in our budget. I'm sorry, I absolutely know we have $42 million budgeted, but we were going to be issuing debt proceeds in that amount. But we now know that we're going to have to be acquiring land. So yes, $1 million could help go towards that. That's an option. I don't think it's a strong option, but it's one that I want to just let you know that we did consider. I think you've heard a lot of people refer to the waiting list that we maintain now. We absolutely capture every budget request. We don't lose it. We tell people that we hear them, that their needs are important. These are the top current items that are on that waiting list, waiting for funding. City Hall roof is a few years behind being repaired. We do have leaks during the rainy season. I feel this personally because one of my financial analysts has a tarp over her desk that drains into a wastebasket on a top shelf when it rains. And, the mayor and the city, Brian Davis, we've gone up on the roof and we've looked at it and we nod our heads and so we say, yep, it's past time. However, we do limp along. We can, our facilities department does the best they can and we can make do. The server room cooling units, we had this on our list last year during the budget time, and we talked to IT. We had kind of conflicting issues. It's 30 years old. Will it last a little bit longer? The cooling units in our server room, which houses every server that the city relies on, I consider the financial system, the GL the accounts payable and the payroll servers important. However, we're also talking police servers. I don't want to lose sight of this. We're not in crisis, but recently Thomas pointed out that the temperatures in the server room, they're getting a little bit warmer. And so if he's pointing to finance, if this is a finance reason why we haven't taken care of things, why I need to own that and bring it and say maybe this needs to be on our front burner. The Brook Lake roof repair, I can't speak as strongly to that one. I know that's a parks facility. I do hear that it's in terrible shape. Bucket truck is an interesting one because our IT department requires a bucket truck to be able to reach cameras all over the city. Parks and Public Works have their needs, and PD, I don't remember. What I do hear from all 4 departments is we only have one truck, we're all sharing it, we all can't quite get the amount of time we need to. That would be an item that we would want to expand the fleet for. And then maintenance worker truck, I think we just heard that that's still one of the trucks where it's still on the waiting list. We did hire a maintenance worker. So I have a little package. This would be another way that I would propose we consider for the top things that are on the waiting list were $1 million to come to us in extra revenue. Vehicles, I have mentioned this before, and I want to make it, I'm making a bigger effort on this one because I have a year-old spreadsheet. We talked about this at the budget season. Councilman McDaniels, this is a wonderful orientation. I don't think we have really, I don't think I've brought this amount of detail to council before. Citywide, we have 242 vehicles. How many did we replace in 2021? We replaced 17. We are kind of trying to be frugal. How many did we replace in 2022? We replaced 28, and I think most of those are PD vehicles, quite frankly. We should be replacing in the range of 30 per year. We should be budgeting and spending 1.4 million a year. I asked how many do we have that are beyond useful life? How many should we have if we were replacing them on a time schedule? And the answer was 2.2. So there's $3 million that I think we are kind of behind. And I look at them, and 3 of them are from community development, and there's the years that's what the model years are of those vehicles. PD, we've got 14 vehicles that were manufactured in 12, 13. Parks and Public Works, same sort of thing. There's no substitute for firsthand knowledge. I walked over to the maintenance shop and I asked the guys, show me your oldest vehicles. Now, most of these are Parks vehicles. I have dent and rust circled. And when you have a maintenance budget, the oldest vehicles, quite frankly, are not going to be at the top of your list to maintain because really they're the next ones to be replaced. These guys, if you ask them to stretch the useful lives, can you get by with them? Yes. During COVID, some of these vehicles were the office or the shelter. This is where guys worked out of. You know, they couldn't work at the shop; they had to be out in the field. And so I think you've heard multiple stories corroborating the same sort of thing. So when I tell you that I want to enable the finance part of this story, the budget part of this story, we want to start budgeting increased amounts of spendable revenue as we go forward so that we start budgeting on schedule and we don't tell our people to see how long we can make them work. You know, there's a kind of a balance in how you want the city to look. I understand that there's some debate over what style of pickup truck represents the city well. I'm not going to get into that one. Councilman Dovey, I'm talking to you. But I have to own this problem, right? So that's one of the ways that we could deploy $1 million. Now, there is another thing that we are making continual progress. And here I'm the accounting guy speaking for EJ's program. But since 1992 regulations, we have been making continual progress on intersection ramps, push buttons, signage. This is all parks and all city facilities. We have to be upgrading them. That's these little dips in at the corners at an intersection, that kind of thing. Am I being technical enough, EJ? Okay, thank you. But if funding is our primary factor, then I just need to be vigilant that we need to be continually looking to see if this is a priority. We are making progress. We're not in danger. I don't know. EJ tells us we could spend as much as we could give him. So at the end of the day, there's also, am I telling you we need to make a decision on $1 million tonight? No, I'm not. We could save the $1 million. You could ask for more information on any of these things. But also, as we talk about how do we make choices, let me share with you how all of the department heads, city administrator, and the mayor and I, first off, we consider the importance of things that are requested versus their urgency. Here's a little matrix that's got 2 columns for high and low importance and 2 rows for high and low urgency. If something is high urgency and high importance, that's what we ought to do first. No question about it. If it's low importance, we should avoid it because we don't want to take needed resources. If it's low urgency and low importance, keep it on the list, don't lose it. Things will change, maybe it will become important or urgent. And then, you know, in the Eisenhower matrix, they always teach us that it's that 4th square, that yellow square, that's the one where you want to plan, you want to focus. If it's not urgent, but it is important, well, let's prioritize it. But you know what? In a perfect world, we never get there because we can't do all the things that are in the green box. We've got things that are high importance, high urgency, and there's not enough money. So we also consider, have we got money, or could money come from another place? Is there a possibility for grant funding? And then is it something that we should have done before now, or is it something new? Because we don't want to be adding new obligations if we haven't taken care of our past obligations. So if we've got something that we're obligated for, we got funding, we should do it. If it's something new, let's defer it. If it's not new and we don't have funding, well, keep it on the list. And then the stuff that we really should have done but we don't have money, that's where we want to keep track of it. So all that is kind of a framework for how we do decision-making. So then, how do you prioritize something like that? Well, here's just, I've stripped out all the descriptions, because what you do is you take all of the projects on your list, and then you rank them. Which ones are the must-dos? Which ones are important, urgent, obligations that are existing, and that we don't have any other way to pay for? And then you sort it, and all the things that sort to the top, well, that's what the things we probably ought to spend our $1 million on. So when I look at the possibilities of how we could use our revenue, some of these are judgment calls. I kind of come out with that the top things on our waiting list, or our vehicle replacement, or our ADA sidewalks. Those fit all of the green things. The land acquisition, you know what? We're going to end up rolling that into debt. We're going to probably do an interfund loan to take care of the immediate acquisition, and then we'll do a continuing resolution so we can roll it into debt. We could just leave it in the savings and do further research, further discussion. We would love to bring you, all of the departments have got needs. We don't have enough money to do them. And then field turf, there may be some other funding, and I'm not the right guy to speak to that. John Hutton's here, and he can do that. But your instructions to us were, don't let go of the field turf. Bring us a package that shows we can still do it, and we can. So what I'm looking for, what I'm asking for, is if you would, all of those smaller dollar amounts, we do need to have a budget amendment for those. And I didn't do a good job of writing your motion, because I would really appreciate some direction. Could you give me an approval to amend, or to approve, move the budget amendment on to, it's gonna have to come for two council meetings, first hearing, second hearing. But if you could give me some direction on which option we should be bringing to the regular council meetings, sure would appreciate that, and then we can do that. And there is where I'm looking for your feedback. And with that, I'll pause for questions.
Dovey?
Yeah, I'll give you my feedback. I mean, I think we should, we took the money out of ARPA that was gonna go to the fields, and we need all these different things, but if we don't start now, we'll never get it done. And I feel pretty strongly that we had an issue that came up at where we moved it to the community center. The decision, if we'd been doing the fields, this money would be going to the community center. It wouldn't be going to trucks and all the different things, although we need them. So I think we need to go back to what the council said we wanted to do and drive the stake and start that project. I'm one of 7.
So real quick, just for understanding, are we making a motion to just do the small adjustment, or what is the current?
It's up to you. You could do everything that the direction I need is what to do with that $1 million. The other stuff I think is fairly clear.
So just to be clear, what's in the packet and the mayor's, I think, recommendation is the turf field replacement. So that's how it's written right now. If you want to change it, that's the kind of direction I think that Mr. Grimm is looking for.
Right. Brian Davis and the mayor both said, present the field turf, but then also show the waiting list items, just so that we're showing you full disclosure.
Actually, Councilman, do you mind giving me a little more feedback on the turf? Because I'm struggling now for understanding the importance of the turf, to be honest. And I look at B, C, and F, determine what we want to do with A, B, C, and D in the future. So if you enlighten me a little bit more on that.
I'll enlighten you from my standpoint. Remember, I'm only one of 7, okay? All of these things are very, very important, and I bet from the way the interest rates are, Steve will be coming back to us in another quarter. I got another $1 million because we made great investments on T-bills or whatever we did when we were only getting 100,000 and now we're getting millions. Now, I think, we took this ARPA money, we spread it around, we gave a tremendous amount to human services, which we needed to do. We gave a tremendous amount, never enough, but to other organizations for dump trucks and snow plows and trucks and different things like that went around the city. But we haven't, in my opinion, given anything to the general public of our citizens. And I think AstroTurf, or whatever you call it, field turf at the Celebration Park is going to make it more playable, more accessible to the many people that aren't benefiting from the things that we gave for human services and for the trucks. I mean, they all benefit. And it's a statement that Federal Way is a place that we take care of our parks and our people have a place to go. And we're always gonna need trucks, and we're always gonna, need a air conditioner and a server. I'm surprised we still have servers, but anyway, I thought we'd be all in the cloud by now, someday soon. But I understand. But I think it's a statement, and it's something we've been talking about for years. And putting field turf on those 2 fields at the Celebration Park expands the use of our citizens through the winter. It's less maintenance, and it's just kind of putting a stake in the sand that we're doing things for everybody in the community. We have the money set aside from all these other funds that have been there, put together over years. Good stewardship of putting the $1.4 million over time, over the last budgets. Our previous economic development person did that, and our current one is doing the same thing. So $1 million to go to those fields, again, is telling our citizens they're important too, and we want the youth to have a place to hang out and play and not have to close those fields in the winter. That's why I'm adamant for it, because we were going to put $1 million from ARPA, and then unfortunately, we got to fix the community center showers and all that, but we would have been, the discussion, if we'd already done that, would be, here's $1 million, let's move it over to the community center. We already are doing that, so let's move it back to where it was supposed to go in the beginning.
Council President.
Well, my question here is how on earth are we going to fix the roof for $500,000? Where's that going to come from?
It's on the waiting list for a reason, because we don't have the funding, and it will have to come from future revenue or savings. That's the only way it's going to happen, as everything is here that isn't funded.
Well, we can obviously put the turf fields on hold for a while, but the real issue is we can't have a leaky roof. That's just not going to work.
So maybe you do 500,000 to a roof and 500,000 toward the fields, and we get closer.
Solomon's solution, cut the baby in half.
Mr. Walsh.
Well, as far as the roof goes, umbrellas are cheap, but anyway, so.
Yeah,
Anyway,
and people inside City Hall will make do the same way as the people with the vehicles. I mean, we have good public servants.
No, I guess that my question with the roof, is it a situation where if it's not addressed right away, that it will become more expensive to take care of? Or is it a situation that whether it's fixed now or 6 months from now, it'll be basically the same cost? I think that's what, I mean, is it a situation like over at where the deferred maintenance makes it more expensive or not?
We're looking at if I may, we're looking at a full roof replacement on this building. We've been making consistent and more onerous repairs each and every year for several years. So it's a full replacement, whether you do it today or you do it in 2 years, and we continue to patch. And we have color-coded the tarp that's over Steve's employee's desk, so at least it looks presentable. And umbrellas is a great idea as well. But we're due for a replacement on this building.
How much is being spent on, annually on just patching? Yeah.
I don't have a cost, but we're up there quite a bit. And, it tells you when it leaks. So, and then you're chasing that down. And roof leaks are tricky because they run all over the place, and they can originate in one place and not present themselves inside the building in a completely different area. So we're constantly chasing it. We're up there quite a bit. I don't have an exact cost on you, council member.
If it's something that isn't going to be more expensive, I mean, if we can defer it a little bit without major expense, I mean, it may be worth it to do as the other Jack says and go with the turf fields. That there is other possible funding for the turf fields with grants and stuff, but if we were able to get those grants, hey, we can do another turf field too. I mean, there's additional fields that could be done as well in the future. So, but I think we need to weigh it carefully, and if it was going to be more expensive to defer it, then I'd say that the roof. But otherwise, I think that maybe continue Band-Aids for a little while.
There is one other point to consider, council member, is that eventually we're going to start getting damage inside the building.
That was what I was referring.
Yeah, I was only referring originally to. Yeah, we're spending a fair amount of time up there. As you know, we only have one facility worker right now, and that person's up on the roof quite a bit. We are interviewing right now, so that'll be rectified very soon. But we're spending a fair amount of time up there patching, and the damage it has leaked many times throughout the building. So it's probably, deferring is probably a little more expensive.
And is $1 million a realistic figure for roof replacement, or would it be less than that, more than that? Where would a bid probably come in on that?
500,000.
We have a budget of 500,000.
Or 500,000 rather.
That's our estimate at this point.
Okay.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. We've known that this roof has needed to be replaced for quite a while. And to hear that an employee has a tarp over their workstation is horrifying to me. Absolutely horrifying. That's not where I would want to work. And I don't think any of us want an employee to have to work under those circumstances. And it could happen to someone else if it's happened to one person. So I don't think we have a choice but to replace the roof and ASAP. We have to show our employees we care about them, and we care about their work environments, and we want to keep them safe. I don't want to hear in 2 or 3 years what we heard from E.J. Walsh a few years ago, that the employees over at the maintenance yard wanted our offices because we had new offices and they were working in an area that was not healthy and not safe. So I don't think that this is a choice. I think that this is a must-do, and clearly it stands out to me as where the money needs to go. I think with the addition of a grant writer on staff, we can have that grant writer go after grants for turf. I know other cities have gotten grants for turf in the Pacific Northwest, and I'm not sure why we haven't been able to do that. So
We actually have been able to get, we've been funded several times.
Okay, So I would say that our priority has to be maintaining City Hall and getting that roof replaced so that we don't have any more issues with employees having to use an umbrella or put a tarp over their desk. Thank you.
Council President.
Sure, I will agree with Deputy Mayor Honda. We're just going to have to put it on hold and just keep the pot going on the fields, and split the baby. But we need to fix the roof. We don't have a choice.
Mr. Dovey?
Yeah, I would say, do the roof. I mean, I would be on that like tomorrow because it's gonna start raining here maybe in some day soon, however we do that. And I agree with Deputy Mayor and Council President, but I would think that the other $500,000 we put towards the fields and the crew, and we don't have to spend that today. But a roof you gotta buy. You don't have any choice. And it's probably gonna be 600 or 700,000. Nothing's, it's gonna be a lot more than you're saying 500, I bet you.
So keep your hands off the 500. We need to keep that in your pot, John. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I could go for that and you know, as that, you know, if we're using 500,000 for the roof and how long will it take for our, your wise investing with our funds to come up with another 500,000 to be able to do this other?
As you saw on that revenue worksheet, I'm only looking at the revenue that has actually come in the bank that we have received in sales tax and utilities and in permits, as well as interest. So we can continue to march quarter by quarter. And I realize I'm bringing you a difficult decision because they are all important, and some of them are urgent. And we can continue to march quarter by quarter, and that's why I come to you looking for priority direction. And I'm not shifting it all on you, I'm joining you. And I think what you're hearing from every department is we are working together. We're all working in concert. So we will solve all of these. It's kind of like which do we do in which order? I'm tap dancing because I think actually the interest revenue is fairly certain. It's the other ones, the sales tax, the other ones that are a little bit less certain. But so far this year, we're coming in positive to budget consistently. So I'm hopeful and optimistic, but I'm only showing you what we've got in the bank.
Right. Thank you.
Sure.
So on the turf one, I do have one question. It's gonna be for the soccer fields, and I drove by the other day, and it has soccer field rules. It says reservations required. So when we talk about the fields being useful to the residents of Federal Way, these new fields, are they gonna have the same reservations required? Are kids gonna have to call to say, I wanna go play on the fields? Or that's my stipulation on why I'm not so forward with the turf replacement.
They would be a lot more open, and the reason that reservations are required is that natural grass, which is what's out there today, it's actually sand-based prescription turf, has a very dramatic shelf life. It can only withstand so much play. We never stop people from playing, walking on and playing, kicking the ball around, a few kids. It's organized games that require reservation.
Okay, so if we do the turf, I assume that this rule is gonna make more sense then? Is it gonna be adjusted so it says free to play unless scheduled out or something? Or is it gonna leave the same ruling that's gonna be on there?
Something along those lines, although there will be times where it will be reserved for tournaments, league
Understood.
play and things like that. So people then couldn't just, we don't want to have the sign be misinterpreted that you can walk on and play no matter what's going on out there, because there would be organized events, tournaments, league play, things like that. But yes, there's very little consequence to having people play almost as much as they want on artificial surface versus natural grass in the Northwest.
I'm pretty much in agreement with you guys then. I think the roof and what's left over, if that's how the rule's gonna be with the turf, then just put it towards there. And then, I know the interest rate's guaranteed, everything else is kind of questionable, but we're gonna be talking about the interest next anyway, so I'm agreeing on that one, roof first, and then residual can go in to the turf.
Tanya, you wanna say something?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to point out, just for visibility to the new council person as well, that there is some funding there that is scheduled for, to come from the LTAC, the Lodging Tax Fund. So that's also just, it has to go through a process. It can't just be pulled from the Lodging Tax Fund. It would have to be demonstrated through an application and also a discussion with the lodging tax committee. So just to also keep that in mind on the lodging, on the field turf, the 1.4 million.
So there's additional money you're saying is floating around right now, or I'm confused on?
It's incorporated, it's just on line 2.
It's a different.
The 1.4 million
Correct.
LTAC.
Yeah.
She's saying council has no authority to spend that money until the LTAC commission authorizes it.
Oh, I didn't know I had said something like that.
Yeah.
Well, I would assume that if it went to the lodging tax and it had benefits of soccer tournaments and different things like that, which benefits hotels and people in beds, I would be surprised if they said, no, we're not going to do that. But you're right, there is a process.
So my question on the Celebration Park then, currently, it isn't open to the public. You know, it's locked, the gates are locked to the fields and when they're not in use. I've seen kids crawl over the fences to get into the fields to play. It always scares me when they do that. But if we were to eventually one day put turf there, then when there's not an organized game there that someone has rented the field for, then it would be open to everyone. Because right now, people, you know, a lot of folks in our city don't consider the Celebration Park a park where they can take their children to play.
Well, just for clarity, only 2 of the fields have fences on them. There's 4 soccer fields, 2 are completely unfenced and open at all times for that non-organized play that I just described. You can't just show up with 28 guys and play soccer without a reservation, without talking to us and paying for that. But kids and parents are welcome, and they're on 5 and 6 all the time. Yes, indeed, kids do climb the fence, and people climb the fences on 7 and 8, but 5 and 6 are open full-time.
Okay.
They're not fenced.
Okay. So I have few comments. I haven't speak a lot today, so okay. So I have a different take on this one. I'm not against the field tough. However, it seemed to me like we have other potential source of money to fund this project. So my own recommendation would be focus on the roof. I agree with most of you about the safety of the employee, safety of the equipment and all that. So I think that is our first priority. But I also want to recommend the replacement of the server room AC unit. Here's why. Because if that room get into hot, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but if that thing is, the room is getting too hot and equipment start to fail, the city will come to stop. I have a server in my building, and I have experienced some of the elevated temperature in the room, and you know, I have to wake up in the middle of the night, go into the office, put some Band-Aid on it so that the equipment don't fail. So my recommendation would be to spend that $200,000 to replace the AC unit to make sure that the equipment is safe. And then my third choice would be fund the bucket truck for the public works. So that's my recommendation. Thank you.
I have a comment on the server room. So it has been down the list for quite some time. And largely so because we have 2 units down there. So we have a lead and a leg. They are both installed in 1994. They use R22 refrigerant. There is a unit downstairs, or 2 units downstairs, and then 2 rooftop units to the condensers and the evaporators. So the reason it was down on the list so far is because I kept putting it off, because we have 2 of them, right? We have redundancy. One of them can kind of lead, and for a long time when we moved in, one was taking the lead. Even though they were both on, one was always taking the lead, and so they ran up a lot of hours on one of them. And at the time that we did the energy grants, I think 2012 or so, when we replaced the 2 rooftop units, we asked the contractor at that time, Mac Miller, what about these units? And they said, don't worry about it, it's okay, we can still get parts for them. Well, fast forward, that was like 2012, fast forward to 2023, parts are starting to become harder and harder and harder to get for those units now. So we have kind of limped them along. And what kind of brought them up to number one was this year we've had two incidents now. Before we'd never had, but this one we did have two. We had an issue where this building lost power and the generator came on like it's supposed to, and you know, carried the load and it came back, you know, the power utility came back on and everything was fine. Those units didn't come on. There's an issue with the controls. And so just overnight, so that power outage happened somewhere around 10 o'clock or so at night, that power outage happened. And what I thought wouldn't happen as quickly as it did, by the next morning at 6 a.m., when one of my guys came in and looked at it, the room was already 90 degrees. It usually sits at 70. And that delta, I didn't think would happen that fast, because over the years, like you know, Councilmember Dovey hit on a part pretty quick, and that is we're virtualizing. So the amount of servers that we have, and Councilmember McDaniel, I showed you, amount of servers that we had down there has been decreasing. You know, we've gotten a smaller UPS because we don't need the power that we used to. And so we are shrinking, but we're not to the cloud. Another story on that is, you know, when people in other cities have done that and they've wholesaled everything up to Azure, for example, they get the bill at the end of the month for all their servers that are up there, and then they have second thoughts and they bring stuff back on-prem. So we're doing it kind of where it makes sense. And again, we're still trying to be very conservative and resourceful and shrinking our servers where it makes sense. But 90 degrees in less than 12 hours, that was fast. Because I always thought, like, okay, well, it'll happen during the day, we'll know, we'll flip open the door, we'll put a fan in there, you know, there's ways to mitigate this if something happens. But again, it was overnight and nobody was here, and you know, we don't have the monitoring that we probably should on that room for those controls. And then just recently, this last week, something else happened to it. And there's one unit has an issue with one of the compressors, and then the other unit, the fan up top, you know, blew. So basically they both were kind of down. And so that room got, you know, a little bit warm. They were still there was one compressor that was still working. So anyway, long story short is it has been on the list for a while, and it just got to the top, you know, because of some of the more recent challenges. So hopefully that helps.
Yes, can I ask you another question? How much the replacement value that we house in that room, if something fell and we burn everything in there?
Well, coming before you, probably in September, I'll be asking for $75,000 for servers that we have budgeted for this year. Probably about $100,000+ for network equipment. That's not only in there, but we have.
Is that what we spend every year?
And
On a 7-year rotation or something?
Yeah, so the servers have 12-year or 7-year life cycles. So does network equipment. That's a good question. I should probably know the good answer as far as like how much equipment value is down there. But remember, it's hardware and then it's also labor, because even if the hardware fails, you know, server overheats or something like that and blows out a power supply or something, you know, that stuff can be rebuilt, but it's the time now, because so there's the human labor capital as well that you kind of have to factor in. So I'd have to do a little bit of analysis to kind of see that component of it. And the good news is, I mean, here, we're in a much better spot than we were before, because again, council, I came to you with a backup disaster recovery. And so we have servers over at the PAC now that are backing up our data, and then we have that replicating to the cloud. So we're much better than where we were before. And so but this is still our production. And so even if we do go down, there's still going to be a loss of service for a period of time while we restore everything. But yeah, there is, I would say probably $500,000 to $700,000, $750,000 worth of stuff, you know, equipment value down there.
Okay, thank you. Council President?
If you ever have any cooling emergency, I have a quick access to some liquid nitrogen.
So, my problem is, Steve,
Yes, ma'am.
we've just hired a code compliance officer, supervisor. I mean, these are things that we should be knowing about. We didn't know we had a roof that was leaking. We didn't know we had servers that had a problem. I mean, literally, I don't know why we're prioritizing certain things over others when these should be your top priority. So I don't get it, why you haven't come to us before.
In our budget, all of these, I believe, were on page 35 of the budget book where I showed what's not in the budget. And that is something that's new, and we are trying to turn a corner because we do want to do a better job of bringing what's not in the budget, because we can't do everything. And I don't mean to be throwing all of the problems at you because we're joining you. And I think what you're hearing is that we're trying to prioritize amongst ourselves too.
And one other thing, somehow or another, I'm hearing that all of the things that need to be replaced somehow magically match the amount of money we have from ARPA. And I do agree with Councilmember Adobe that we need to give something to our citizens, but we can't overlook the roof, we can't overlook the servers. So I have a problem with why we didn't know about this before.
Well, thank you, because I think we have brought this, but we haven't made it as visible as I'm making it, perhaps. Yeah. And when the server air conditioning goes out, then it's a crisis. We will make that happen. And so we're trying to look a little bit farther out. We're trying to look more long-term, but bring the highest priorities and make them visible. So when citizens bring you new things, please do bring them to me. Let's put them on the list, because you can see what a difficult process it is.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. So I must have misunderstood what we were doing here, because I thought when I said roof replacement, I included everything under C. Is that not how you presented this?
It's up to you. I do want to come back to the next council meeting with just a very simple budget amendment with all of this
Okay.
discussion resolved into one thing, and then it can move forward.
Because I agree with Councilmember Tran that we need to take care of this server room, that we can't afford to not maintain those things. It's simply just a matter of not being, I mean, you presented the problem very clearly to us. Now, if there is an issue and something happens and we haven't taken care of it, then it's our responsibility. So I really don't see that there's much of a choice that we've been presented. I think that these things have to be taken care of, and I don't even know if $1 million is going to cover it.
And I appreciate the discussion I'm hearing, because one thing I think I did hear is split it between field turf and city hall, but then the server AC room was, so we could make it $1.2 million and do those three things, bring that as this quarter's budget adjustment, and then we come back a quarter from now and we see what revenue has come in. We could do that as well. I'm trying to help facilitate.
I'm less concerned with the field turf at this point than I am with the condition of this building.
We're going to have to do that. We have to do it.
Yeah, it's going to be your motion to move forward, so I'm trying to listen more than lead.
I'll just make a comment. I am very passionate that we need to do these fields, but anybody that lives in a house knows you have to take care of your four walls and your roof before you do anything else. And the next million that comes around, or the next money, I hope you don't come and say, hey, the windows all need to be replaced because they're not double pane and they should be triple pane. But yeah, common sense says, and I agree with the deputy mayor and the council president and everybody else. I mean, I'm passionate about moving those fields. I think we owe it to our citizens and our kids and everybody else that play there. But it would be derelict of our vote if we didn't take care of our four walls, which is a roof and a roof at Brook Lake that's got to fall in and all this stuff. So I'm okay with going with C. I don't like it. I wish I'd known it before. But hey, we got to take care of our four walls. And maybe we can get some new screens up here on the dais so we can read them someday. Anyway.
It's in there.
Yeah.
It's already it's in there.
I think that's in the other part, yeah. No, no. It seems to me on item C, it's really the 700,000, the roof replacement of the server. Those are the critical items. And I would suggest that other 300,000 that we keep in reserve so that when we have, keep it in reserve for the turf fields. And, I don't think we needed to do all of Plan C. It can just be those most critical parts and keep the rest in reserve for the turf fields.
I would agree with the first two roof and the servers, and we don't even know what the final bid's gonna be. So
Yeah.
if we have that extra 300 reserve, it might just be sucked up into one of those.
It could be.
And if not, then we have the ability to utilize it somewhere else.
Yeah.
Those would be the most important in my mind.
But if, I bring it up, and this is not what I'd want to do, but if Brook Lake's roof is leaking, and that is an asset, you got to deal with that too. I'd rather put the 100,000 towards a turf field or something, but I don't want to have the call, hey, Brookleaf, it's this historic place and the roof fell in, and we've been trying to do something with it for years, and maybe our grant writer will find us $10 million to make a great interpretive center at Brook Lake or something, but we probably need to consider that roof.
Could we get a little bit more of an update on just exactly what the situation is with Brook Lake, too?
That roof's in pretty rough condition. That's my technical, it's pretty rough. We had, as Jason described it, a waterfall. We were able to do a temporary repair that stopped that waterfall. But it's an old roof, and we know that we'd like to preserve that building. We will preserve that building, so we're watching it closely, and, but it does need to be replaced as well. We've got some other work that we'd like to complete out there first, removing the condemned portion, and that way the new roof is correct in appearance, to maintain that historical look to the facility. But it is not currently leaking, and we are watching it closely.
Like he's mentioned, we don't have to spend the whole million, but I'm a little concerned that these numbers are not gonna be what they're gonna come back at. So I'd rather pick the ones that we feel are the most top, say check, 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 see what they come back at, and see if we have more money to play with, or if we have to go find funding from somewhere else. But, yeah, that's I just wanna make sure that we have a little fluff in there, because I do not believe it's gonna come back with what we see on here at the moment.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. Have we asked For Culture for any assistance with the roof over there or anything over there at Brook Lake?
We've met with For Culture and the historic preservation folks that are a part of them.
Right.
And we'll be working with them as we get into the historical preservation, but not specifically on a roof situation yet.
Okay.
We will partner with them as long as it's beneficial for us to do so. We absolutely will.
Okay, thank you.
Council President?
So I would just ask that this committee continue to pursue the field turf in the future, reserving money as it becomes available, keep your cookie jar separate, and keep your money in that jar for what it's intended for, and keep moving forward on that. Literally, our citizens pay taxes, utility tax, for the fields, and they're not using them. They're really going to and it's not enough. The people that come in to play with the heads and beds, it's not enough to cover the tax that are being, people drive through there and they think, oh, this is wonderful. It's not our kids playing in the fields. And so we really need to redirect what's going on. I've had council members from other cities in the past come up to me and say, how do you get away with that? How do you get away with charging your citizens the tax for those fields that other people use, and there's no way that what their revenue is covering the costs of even operating the fields, and then your own citizens don't get to use them? So my question or my desire would be simply that we get a pot going so that we can start reserving those fields so that we have 24-hour play when we get some field turf on there, so that our citizens can use the fields that they're paying for. Anyway, just my request of this committee to kind of move forward. Thank you.
Just for a point of clarity, our Federal Youth Soccer is the major user. That's all Federal Way kids, every single one of them. So they are the major user. However, to your point, and your point is well taken, a lot of people that aren't in Federal Way also use them.
You have a survey, or not a survey, but a book that has a baseball on the front. And it was a review of the amount of revenue coming in for the fields and the amount of money expenditures going out. And it nowhere near covers the amount, you'd have to have more fields. And so literally, I just think that we need to be cognizant of the fact that our citizens are paying for those fields for the majority. And that's something that our citizens should be using. Thank you.
All right, I think I don't see any more light, and we ready for a motion?
Are we looking for some guidance on a motion?
Yes, please.
I wrote one, and let me just read it out. You can make it up if you'd like. I'm happy to do it that way. So the draft motion, what I heard was, I move to forward the proposed ordinance modified to fund roof replacement at City Hall and AC replacement for the server room. Does that sound right? I didn't hear a consensus
I think
on
we
it.
should put Brook Lake in there too,
Okay.
and then put the other in a cookie jar.
That's not in the motion, but I hear you loud and clear, sir. I do. I do.
Until we have the next crisis.
Okay, let me restate the motion. I move to forward the proposed ordinance modified to fund roof replacement at City Hall, AC replacement for the server room at City Hall, and fund roof replacement at Brook Lake. If someone wants to say so moved.
I agree with that motion. Do we have a second?
Second?
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the matter passed. You know, I feel like this is a full council meeting. It's not a feedback meeting anymore.
Until 6:30 it was.
Except you're at almost at 2 hours.
No, it's 3 hours already.
No, I mean, until 6:30 we actually had
You're
everybody
spoiling
here.
your record from last time.
You're gonna make land use be a piece of cake.
Her battery failed about quite a while ago.
Lydia still?
What's that?
Lydia, her phone battery failed, so she,
Oh, okay.
quite a while ago.
But yeah, everyone else.
Well, thank you, Steve.
Thank you very much, and as I walk away, may I just thank you, because every director here has got staff who's always asking for these important things, and they blame finance, and what I want to convey to them is that you heard them all. You can't do them all, but you really heard them, and I appreciate that. I know that I made you struggle through this, and I just want to thank you, because,
You can just blame us,
and we will continue this.
everybody else.
The city economy is doing well. I will come back the next quarter. I hope we have more revenue. I think we will. Thank you very much for the feedback.
Great. Thank you. Now we are moving on to item P, AP voucher from 6/15/23 to 7/15/23, and payroll voucher from 6/01/23 to 6/30/2023. Chase, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Deputy Mayor, Council President Kochmar, Chair Tran, Council Committee members. Before you are the AP vouchers in the amount of $3,723,111.45, and payroll vouchers in the amount of $4,442,025.58. We did send out an email based on Deputy Mayor Honda's questions before the meeting, so thank you for sending those.
Thank you for the answers.
Yeah, you're welcome. We'd be happy to answer any other questions you may have on any of those detailed vouchers.
Any question? Paul?
I just actually, mine's not on the AP, it's on the payroll. I was just curious, is the larger increase, is that based off of seasonal employment or?
Yeah, so the summer months increase seasonally for the parks employees typically. The different summer camps increase that, as well as the parks maintenance staff that come out and maintain our parks.
Okay, thank you.
I don't see any other questions. Motion?
I move to forward the vouchers to the August 8, 2023 consent agenda for approval.
Second.
We have motion and a second. Any other questions for Chase? Here none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Matter passed 3-0. You have the next one, Chase, monthly financial report for May 2023.
All right. So I get to bring us to the finish line this evening. I'm excited. I get the pleasure to do that. So this is the June financial report. We are 6 months through the year, so we're halfway through, which gives us a good indication of how the city's doing. It helps us identify some of our trends. As we show you each month, we're at 50%. So 6/12ths, or if you like to do fractions like I do, we're at 1/2 of the year. And so I'll take us through some of the revenues. Through preliminary through 6 months, we're favorable. Of our year-to-date budget of $22.6 million, we're favorable by $2 million, or 8.7%. We will touch on those major revenue sources and identify why we're continuing to do well. Expenditures are also favorable. The year-to-date budget of $29 million by $0.3 million, or 1.1%. We will talk a little bit about that. That primarily has to do, as we indicate in our report, due to police vacancies, as well as timing of human services, community service grants that go out of the general fund, et cetera. So how are the revenues trending in the city? These are our major revenue sources that Steve was indicating even during our budget amendment. 5 of our major revenue sources are above year-to-date budget, and 3 are below. 2 that are below are minor and just have to do with timing. 1, real estate excise tax, we'll talk a little bit more about, that we're monitoring, but sales tax, utility tax, permits and fees, business license fees, and investment interests are all trending above the year-to-date budget, and are doing quite well, and we'll look at a few of those graphs in these upcoming slides. Sales tax in particular is $537,000, or 7.7% over the year-to-date budget, and $888,000, or 12% over the prior year. As indicated in the trend line here, the actual cumulative, we show through the month of May, but this is our June report. There's a lag on that, and then we show the prior year cumulative. And so it is, and then the gray section is the budget cumulative. So we're about $537,000 over year-to-date budget. One thing to note here is that we did just make the budget amendment in this report from the last budget amendment that was passed on June 6th by City Council. And so those numbers are reflective in these tables. We did increase sales tax slightly during that budget amendment, and we are still trending over the budget, over the prior year. Retail sales and services sales tax is doing well, as well as one-time construction sales tax, if we're looking at specific categories. Utility tax revenue is also doing quite well. The graph is laid out very similarly. This is approximately $18 million budget, and it is $923,000, or 12% over budget, and $580,000, or 7% over prior year. This does include all types of utility tax. So this is, so our utility tax is split out a specific way. So 6% is used for city services. 1.75% is the Proposition 1 utility tax. Then we have the additional 10% on solid waste activities, which is specifically used for residential street overlay. This does include all those sources. And so just because we're $923,000 over budget doesn't mean that's all available or not restricted. Some of that is restricted for specific purposes. Property tax revenue is showing right now about $89,000, or 1.4% under year-to-date budget, and about even with prior year. This just comes in April, May, and October, November each year. So it's cyclical. It should catch back up. It's just timing differences. This is a pretty standard, as you see, kind of the graph make too large jumps within the year, that we do account for that for cash flow purposes. You know, we need to make sure that we keep within spending cash flow, but we do fine with that and we monitor that. And property tax should come out even. On real estate excise tax, we are still monitoring this. This is 555,000 or 24% under budget, and 1.1 million or 39% less than the prior year. This has to do with housing sales and commercial sales. They've dropped a little bit, but we are still monitoring that. This is a restricted funding source that can only be spent on capital or debt service payments. And so we do have those budgeted for this year, and we should be fine. We just need to continue to monitor it for future years and make sure that it comes back. We are hopeful that it will come back, as we have seen a slowing in the market a little bit on the investment side that we'll touch here in a minute. And so we hope to see rates go down a little bit, and hopefully the real estate market kind of picks up again. But we are monitoring it month over month. Lodging tax revenue, although this is a small funding source, this is about 300,000 a year of our total budget. Our total budget is, you know, over 100 million. So 300,000 is a very small portion of our budget, but it is a good indicator of how our economy is doing and how the hotel industry is making comeback. As indicated previously, with the field turf, the city has done a good job at not spending that quickly. And so that 1.4 million that was identified earlier is because the fund balance has been built up within that fund. And so it has a pretty strong fund balance within the lodging tax fund. Investment revenue, as we've talked about month over month, is 828,000 over budget and 1.5 million over the prior year. This has to do with higher interest rates that we've been discussing. We are making monthly investments. One rolls off, we make another investment. I sit in the office with Steve on a monthly basis when we do that for control purposes, and you know, we're still getting 4-point-something% on investments, and that's quite high. And so when you have a large cash flow within the city, that ends up being a good amount of revenue. We bring this cash balance trend every month to you. This shows you in the blue, this is our investments. This is the 55 million that we continue to invest, and one drops off. We had another one. The green is our LGIP, Local Government Investment Pool. This is held with a state. And then the yellow, which is checking for safety, this has to do with what the cash that we're keeping on hand to pay for our payroll and accounts payable checks and make sure that we have enough cash on hand to cover our current expenses. And then this identifies the different investments that the city has. So in this green, this is the LGIP. This is liquid next day. So we can ask for this money from LGIP next day. It's very quick. And then the rest are the various different investments, the treasuries that the city has purchased, and the agencies on this kind of right side, which are backed by the federal government. So one of the things that we brought up last month that we'll also bring up again is that in June there was no rate hike. And so this is an indication of potentially a slowing in the market. We are making investments out 4 years. And so we're locking in rates at higher rates. And so we expect to continue to bring in the revenue that we have budgeted and even more. As indicated during this budget amendment. And so we're doing quite well. And this just gives a 2-year average, and as of June, the rates were around 4.64%. This also, as we bring monthly, just to show kind of what we purchased, what dropped off, a 1 million federal home loan at 1.5% back when we purchased that investment of $1 million dropped off, and then we were able to grab another investment at 3.9%. And so it ends up turning around quite well. So we're managing to our budget. Our revenues are almost all favorable. We're monitoring REIT. Lodging tax is a smaller source. It's slightly under, but seems to be coming back to the pre-pandemic levels. The expenses are on track within the budget. We're continually monitoring that. We do have some vacancies in different departments, so that yields some savings. Cash balances continue to be strong, as we indicated. And we're watching investments, but we're also, locking in some of our investments at higher rates to have some security for future budgets. We'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Just got a couple quick ones. So I was looking through, could you go back to the pie chart?
Yeah.
While you're doing that, my question is, so the 33 million, 35 valued, is U.S. Treasury, that's the dark blue, and then all the light blue ones, is that the securities and the government securities you've been locking in?
Yeah, that's the agencies.
Okay.
The government security agencies.
And then are we just sticking at the 1 million, just recycling through it? Are we adding to it? I mean, these rates are once in a lifetime in my mind. So I'm just curious on, is our game plan just to take the 1 million, just recycle it through?
Yeah, we're taking the 1 million recycling, but we've been adding a few short terms within, and then we're also been making a few more investments that we'll bring back in the month of July. And so we've added a couple more on the long end as well.
And it looks like previous mindset was 1 year. Looks like the mostly 1 year terms. Now we're going more like the 3 to 4.
Yeah, we're out to
This morning,
a little over 4.
This morning, we bought a 4-year, 4-month. We're stretching it out to 5 years now.
Okay, slowly. Okay. That was my main question.
That's our bet.
Good one.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Oh, thank you. So on REIT, so we're 23.6% lower than we budgeted, or we anticipated, and 38.8% below the 2022 year-to-date collections. Is this something that was expected? And is this a trend in South King County or overall in the region that other cities are experiencing this too, or are we unique?
We are not unique. I don't have specific comparisons, but I can look at other jurisdictions' monthly reports or quarterlies. I know that we're all experiencing the same market with housing sales with the interest rates going up. People aren't, I think there's still some strength in, things selling, I think, but it's not some of the larger one-time sales aren't occurring as much as they did in the prior year. So we're monitoring those one-time items.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Walsh and then Mr. Dovey.
I think I've asked this question before, but with the sales tax, but I don't think I've gotten a response. With the sales tax, what percentage of it comes from online sales? And I think I've asked it and haven't really gotten an answer on it.
A significant portion, but I don't think we have it, because, when we see Lowe's or Home Depot or various retailers, some of theirs is online, so I don't have we don't get a split between brick and mortar versus online. However, we know it's very significant. There's, we're not allowed to give proprietary information, but there's one.
There's a percentage of it that
Yep.
from certain sources that is online.
Yeah, because we
Can
have such a
you-
high residential population, and a lot of it is on the front porches all across the city.
Yeah.
We know it's significant. We really do.
Is it 30% or?
Could be. I don't have that number, and that's me guessing, so now I'm going out on a limb. Chase, go ahead, jump in.
I think it's not a category that we're provided. I think I agree with you. There are some specific payers that are probably all online. But to split out the pairs that are partial online and partial brick and mortar, I think we wouldn't be able to make that determination. We can't give the proprietary information. We probably could generally come up with a category, but we'd be misreporting it if we were giving a number, because we don't know, if Home Depot's listed, for example, we don't know which portion would be online and which portion would be within the brick and mortar store. That information is not provided to us.
Okay.
I think Tanya trying to provide some information. Go ahead.
Just adding a little bit to the complication of online sales, it's not, the sales tax is not at the point of sale, it's at the point of delivery.
Exactly, and
So-
exactly, and that's why I'm asking what percent is online, just to kind of give it an idea of what, how dependent the sales tax revenue is on local businesses and how much it's dependent on online businesses.
Yeah, there's no way that you could tell that because it just would get too complicated. I mean, if someone's having a local delivery within Federal Way or within King County or, within the country, that would be pretty tough.
But what you can look at is the graph that shows sales tax. It's on a $20 million scale, and our percent is 3.6%. Consumers pay 10.1, and 3.6 comes to the city. So that shows what our portion is. So the retailers, I just come back to when the businesses thrive, we thrive.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Dovey?
So my question has to do with the real estate excise tax. I think everybody realizes that it's not going to come back for the rest of this year. I mean, houses aren't selling like they used to, and so if you were to project this out at these rates of underperforming, what do you think, if it just stayed the same it was today, how much are we going to be down at the end of the year? What's our negative?
You could almost draw a line with a ruler there, couldn't you? And as Chase pointed out, some of this funds our debt. Well, we transfer our debt service. 100% of this year's payments are already in the debt service fund, so we're okay there. The other projects that it funds are in public works and parks. We could have to delay some projects, and John Hutton and EJ when Chase says that we're monitoring, that's why, because we need to tell them, you guys have to not spend money that we're not going to get. And so that would be delaying projects until it comes.
But I guess make my ears work so I can hear. My question is this: we've budgeted projects that are capital at the very beginning, and anybody that looks at this knows we're going to be upside down 3 million. I mean, if it's not going to come back, and it's going to be on this trend line. So how many of those projects that we budgeted are not going to happen, or are at risk, or we're going to have to come back with millions of dollars to fill the gap if we wanted to get them done?
Chase,
million?
I'm actually flipping to see what our fund balance is.
Okay.
Yeah,
We have a $2.8 million fund balance sitting in REIT as a backstop.
Okay. So we're not going to get
We're juggling, we admit it.
you're not going to get a request to do potholes like we did a roof, right?
That's out of the street fund, sir.
yeah.
Yes. I mean, it's capital money, it's not operating, but it's going to be less for sure.
Yeah, on one of the last pages of the monthly financial report that Director Groom just turned to, it's a fund activity summary, and it shows the fund balance on each individual fund that we have for the city, and he's identifying the 113 real estate excise tax fund that's at $2,789,000 currently.
Right. Well, thank you. Good job. Can I have the motion so we can?
Let the new guy make the motion. He need practice.
Make sure I get the right one. I move to forward the June 2023 monthly financial report to the August 6th, 2023 consent agenda for approval.
I second it.
Great. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Matter passed 3-0. Wow.
Thank you.
Okay, just a quick reminder that we are not gonna have the meeting, FedRAC meeting in the month of August. So, if you want to, I'll be here. But no, we want staff to have a chance to spend summer with their family and take long vacation. And so it is our tradition not to have the August meeting. Our next meeting is going to be on September 26th, 5 p.m. in this room. With that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
And the shortest and the longest.